Salt Lake, do you copy?
This is Salt Lake.
Salt Lake, we are going to be good to commence the meeting on time. If you could please bring us in with a countdown.
Southeast region, we're live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, we'd like to welcome you to our Southeastern Regional Advisory Council meeting. This meeting is being held in person at the John Wesley Powell Museum, as well as being streamed live on YouTube. This is a public forum, allows you to express your opinions and ideas on wildlife management in our state. This RAC considers your feedback on the proposals before us today, reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is charged with setting wildlife policy for our state. Wildlife management is complex. Sometimes it's emotionally charged. We all have ideas and opinions about what's best for Utah's wildlife. That's why we're here today. And that's a good thing. We encourage those who want to express their opinion at today's meeting to fill out a comment card. We expect those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that don't align with our own. Respectful behavior helps facilitate efficient meetings where RAC members can listen, digest, and address the concerns, ideas, and proposals being presented for consideration. Disrespectful behavior includes booing, yelling, cheering, laughing while someone is speaking. You can also help maintain a respectful space by referring to people by name instead of by deceptors or their physical characteristics, demeanor, or gender. If this behavior occurs, RAC Chair will remind attendees to be respectful. If it continues, the applicable individual or individuals will be asked to leave. Lastly, we ask you to put your phones on silent to reduce distractions throughout the meeting. So, thanks for bearing with me while I read that. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's introduce our RAC and who you represent. Brandon, can you show who's online so that I can be able to see that? Start down there with Kirk.
Kirk Player, represent Sportsman.
Dana Truman, I represent Bureau of Land Management.
Scoop Flannery, representing Sportsman.
Cash Stallings, Public at Large.
I'm Eric Luke, Sportsman's rep.
Charles Fisher, Sportsman's rep.
Brad Richmond, non-consumptive.
Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Duke, Public at Large.
Okay, I believe that's all of our RAC members that are online. We do have a member of the Wildlife Board who is online also, and also a member of the Wildlife Board here in attendance tonight. We appreciate you guys taking time out of your schedule to join us tonight. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Any comments or any comments or questions regarding the agenda and the minutes of the last meeting? If not, we'll ask for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda and minutes.
Okay,
Second the motion.
have a motion by Kirk, seconded by Brad. All those in favor, raise your hand. Steve raised his. Darren Olson is also online now. So thanks, Darren, for joining us. Darren is our Forest Service representative. That motion passes. So I'll give a quick update of last week's Wildlife Board meeting. This board meeting was concerning the deer management plan. first motion concerning that was the board passed a motion to allow the division to adjust permit numbers 20% without going through the public process. The division's recommendation or proposal was 30%. The board dropped that to 20%. That's what passed. That passed 3-2. The next motion was to accept the remainder of the division's statewide mule deer plan as presented, and that passed 4-1. Regarding the mule deer hunt structure research, that was a little bit of a controversial thing. When it came to the Antler Point restriction that was proposed on the Pine Valley unit, there were two motions made. One to approve it with the youth hunters being included in the restrictions. That motion failed 2-3. There was also a motion to approve it with the youth being able to take anything. That motion also failed 2-3. The next motion that was made and passed unanimous was to accept the weapons restriction on the Boulder unit. And there was two others, the Beaver West and the Thousand Lakes unit. That passed unanimously. And the last motion considering the hunt structure was to approve the remainder of the proposals with the exception of the Antler Point restriction that was proposed on the Pine Valley, and that passed unanimous. Regarding the bucks and bulls hunt tables and season dates for the next 3 years, there's a motion made, passed unanimously, that on the Paunsaugunt, they accept the proposal to overlap the management and the premium archery and overlap the management muzzleloader with the premium muzzleloader. Keep cactus and the premium any legal weapon overlap. So that passed unanimous. Then there was a motion made to that the Three Corners elk hunt season structure be the same time frame and structure as the other hunts, adding an early any legal weapon rifle hunt and adjusting the muzzleloader season. That motion also passed unanimously. And the final motion regarding that was to accept the remainder as presented with the exclusion of the Fillmore Oak Creek early any legal weapon hunt that was proposed. That motion also passed unanimously. With regards to the once in a lifetime hunt tables for and seasonal dates for the next 3 years, there was a motion made to ask the division to work on a memorandum of understanding with the state parks. This is in regards to the Antelope Island sheep hunt. If there's only 2 tags for sheep or deer, they would alternate. Right now, the season date is set up to where the public hunt starts 2 days later. So anyway, that motion passed, and it will be placed on the action log. The next motion was to give the division authority to turn off and turn on hunts for non-residents if there's a severe die-off or other significant change in herd numbers on those once-in-a-lifetime hunts. Next motion was made that the state parks, they asked the state parks to provide an audit for the funds from the sale of the Antelope Island conservation permits. And the last motion, accept the revised dates for the public draw, approve all others as presented. That passed unanimous. And a motion made to ask the division to start in 2026 to look at moving the conservation season dates to line up with the public dates and take that proposal through the public process. Regarding the rules amendments, there's a motion made to reject the division's proposal to give a point to first-time youth hunters going into the youth draw. That passed 4-1. There's a motion made to accept the remainder of the division's proposal as presented. That passed unanimous. Regarding the CWMU renewal, motion made to accept the division proposal as presented with the exception of allowing the JB Ranch to enroll in the CWMU program. And that motion passed unanimous. There was a motion to approve the division proposal to add Antelope Island Conservation Permit to the 3-year cycle. That passed 4-1. And the residency amendment passed unanimously to accept the rules amendment as presented and as directed by statute. So, sorry, that was a little long-winded. Any questions regarding the last meeting?
Eric,
Okay, yes.
this is Steve. Could you clarify what was the ruling on the youth getting a point? You read that, but I missed the first part of it.
So the board rejected that proposal. The reason behind that was they felt like after 1 year, it didn't make any difference. It all stays the same. And it actually hurt those youth that put in last year who then would have to compete with the ones coming in this year. So the intention of the mule deer committee was in the right place there, but basically the board felt like it was a mistake to go with that. So. Any other questions? Okay, let's turn the time over to Chris for our regional wildlife update.
Good evening. Thanks for being here this evening. It's Wednesday in December, and there's a lot going on in your lives. And so we appreciate you taking time out to be here in person and those online too. I don't know that we've ever had a RAC meeting this close to Christmas before, so it's 1 week away. But we have some short timelines I think we got to fit meetings into. So thanks for being here. On your table in front of you, you see either a lantern or a water jug. I think there's enough for you to have either one or the other. If someone's not sitting next to you, maybe you can have both. And then, of course, to thank you for serving on the RAC, we have a gift for you here at the back of the room. You can grab one on your way out. So, thanks for serving on the RAC, and hope you have a great holiday season. Okay, we're having technical difficulties. I was just going to give you a regional update. We've been, it's for some sections in our agency, it's kind of slowing down this time of year. And for some sections in our agency, things have been crazy busy. I have a PowerPoint presentation here that'll help me guide me through some of the work we've done in the last month. No? Okay. We've been doing some mule deer capture. It's capture season. So a lot of the work we've been doing this last few weeks is mule deer captures. We're finishing up in our region on Saturday. I think we're now in the Range Creek unit. And if you're interested in helping out this week, I think we're going through Saturday or Sunday. Let one of the biologists know or let me know, and we'll get you, let you know where we're doing it and what time. We've been all over the region, capturing mule deer, putting GPS collars on them to help us understand their movements, their survivability, and help us really state-of-the-art, cutting-edge type research that we do with BYU and our other partners. Our aquatic section, we've been vacant since April with our AIS biologist. It was Kyler Stilson, and he's moved to our native position. We ran the position a few months ago. We couldn't fill it. So we ran it again, and we've got some great applicants. We're doing interviews for that position on Friday. So we're hoping to get someone in that position for the upcoming season, join our team the first part of next year. Ice fishing has started. I heard Schofield was packed this weekend, which is exciting to see. And as you can see, my other bullet point is that Schofield is now a blue ribbon fishery. It's been put back on that list. If you know the Schofield, you know that it struggled for several years, for a lot of years. Then we got a management team together to write a new management plan. We implemented that plan, and the fishery is back, and people are loving it, and the crowds are an indicator that people are having success. So our habitat section is kind of winding down for a few weeks or a month or two for their field season. They are in the process of writing grants through the Watershed Restoration Initiative with our partners, federal agencies, state agencies, nonprofit groups. We all get together this time of year, collaborate our efforts, and write grants for various funding pools or resources. But the Watershed Restoration Initiative through the state is one of those that matches dollars from nonprofit groups and conservation dollars and federal dollars. So those meetings are happening. The proposal deadline is January 10th. We're also burning piles. Our WMA, our Lower Fish Creek WMA, and then we've done some fence work at Fuller Bottom and Nash Wash to either help manage the grazing we have on those properties or to keep grazing off those areas we want to protect. So both those. And then our officers are also busy this time of year. They're vital in our capture work. We always have a safety officer on scene, and they're also out on the land and looking for talking to hunters and fishermen and trying to educate and teach people about wildlife. And we have some movement going on there. Cheyenne, who is at Bullfrog and has lived there for the last 4 years, is transferring over to this part of the region, and she'll be our Range Creek. Oh, Emery County. She's our Emery. She was going to do Range Creek. She was now going to be the officer in Emery County. Because Aiden, who was our officer who lives in Castledale, is transferring up north up to Utah County. So we'll try to get those positions filled. We have some recruitment going on right now to bring some new officers into this region. And then we have an ice fishing clinic on January 11th. If you want more information there, there's the QR code. Okay. And then I mentioned the capture season. Other than that, Josh, our conservation biologist, is helping out with some bird surveys down in Moab. And then our biologists have also been doing some post-season deer classifications. And that's all I got. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them, or I've got some biologists here in the room to help.
Guy.
Yeah, the question is, what's the update on the Sego trailhead access? I wish I had a better update. The last that I heard was that so for a long time now, months now, 6+ months, right? We've been trying to get an agreement with the tribe, the Ute tribe, to allow sportsmen, horsemen, recreationists to use the Sego trailhead and cross 1 mile of tribal lands to get to the roadless area. There's been some back and forth between us and them on a new agreement. We think we're in a good spot with it. We're waiting for the tribe to sign it and get it back to us, but we haven't received it yet. So currently we don't have that signed agreement. I have heard that the tribe is taking, they are issuing permits on an individual basis. If you call their office and there's a process, I think they have. I've heard they've given some permits. I don't know how many or to who it was, but I've heard that people have accessed that this fall. I'm not sure who that is or what that's about, but That's what I've heard. So we're hoping to get that signed. I mean, we were hoping to get it signed months ago, but we don't have it yet.
Any other questions for Chris? Okay, thanks, Chris. That brings us to our first action item, the waterfowl recommendations for the next 3 years. Jason, you have anything you'd like to update or?
No, I don't have any updates.
Okay, we'll open it up to questions from the RAC. Just real quick, most of you know this, but if you have a question, once we go to the public questions, step up to mic, state your name. If you have a comment, wait for the comments section. Make sure you fill out a comment card, bring it up here to Chris, and then we'll call you out when it's time. So there's no questions from the RAC. We'll open up questions from the audience. No questions from the audience. Chris, give us the online comments.
Yeah, we only had one person fill out the survey online. And I'll just state that all the RAC members received this comment via email. And this comment really applies to all the agenda items today. And so I won't necessarily I don't think I need to go and mention this comment at every agenda item. So I'll just mention it right now for the rest of the night. This comment was, individual was felt that hunting should not be allowed. Big game, cougar, bear, bobcat, coyote. They were against all forms of hunting in Utah.
Okay, thanks, Chris. All right, do we have any public comments for this agenda item? Okay, no public comments. We'll open it up for RAC discussion. No discussion, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendations.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Charles to approve the recommendations as presented, seconded by Kirk. Let's just start with Kirk. Yes?
Yes.
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 Scoot? Sorry, Steve. My
Yes.
bad.
Yes.
And Darren?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimous. That was quick and easy. We'll go to the next one. The Falconry reporting. Any updates, anything you want to clarify there?
This isn't really an update, but if you don't understand what the 3-186 is, I explained a bit of it in my presentation, but falconers are legally required to report those, and this just makes the process a little easier for them. And we had worked with the Utah Falconry Association on this, and they came to the Central Region RAC and supported this recommendation. So.
Thank you. Any questions?
I guess I was just curious on why the double reporting before. Like, are we losing any benefit with going with just one?
No, we're not losing any benefit. I took this program over when I took the job, and this is kind of a heavy-handed approach to have people double report. They're legally required to report to the federal database, and we have to help administer that database. And so there's not really a reason to have them double report. It makes their life harder and actually makes our life harder too. So this makes it better for falconers, makes it better for the Utah Division of Wildlife. We still have access to all the 3-186 forms through the federal database.
So are they just submitting it to you then, and then you're reporting it to the feds, or?
No, they're legally required to report to the federal database, and the Division of Wildlife has to help administer that database. So they're legally required to do that. So having them be also legally required to send us a backup copy is the portion that we're taking out. If I need a copy of their 3-186, I can log on to the federal database and look it up. And the feds require them to report to that database. So what this is removing the requirement for them to also email or send us a copy of that.
Yeah, I understand that portion. I guess my question was more pointed to why were we doing the double reporting in the first place then? Just,
Well, that's before my time, but I do know the federal database died and crashed in 2018, and a lot of data was lost, and we're legally required to keep falconer data for 5 years, but the federal government requires falconers to report to that database. I guess if it did crash, that would sort of be on them. I hope they have it backed up well, but other states do it this way too. When I talked to Idaho, their falconry coordinator is, suggested, why would you have people double report? And I was like, I don't know why we're doing that, but that is historical. We had been doing that in the past, and those were printed off and put in a filing cabinet. Now we can look those 3-186 forms up, through the database really quickly. Like I said, I have to help administer that database. So if a falconer has an issue, like they can't remember their password, I have to help them. Or if law enforcement needs to look up somebody in the database, one of our officers that has an interest in falconry can get into that database. Does that answer your question? The double reporting is before I took over the program. I don't know why we were having folks double report.
okay, thanks.
But I felt it was heavy-handed, and the administration supports us making it a little easier on the reporting requirements.
Yeah, I think most people are against more paperwork. So.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the RAC? Any questions from the audience? I don't believe we have any comment cards concerning this item, so comments from the RAC. I have a comment. I have a nephew who is a falconer, and he actually, that's how he makes his living. He goes to California and has several birds that he oversees vineyards with, and it's pretty amazing to see what those birds are capable of. Pretty cool. If there's no other comments, we'll entertain a motion.
I guess I make a motion to approve it as Division of Wildlife recommended.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Seconded by Brad. We have a motion by Dana to approve as presented, seconded by Brad. Kirk?
Yes.
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 Steve?
Yes.
And Darren?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that takes us to item number 7, our Utah Black Bear Management Plan. Darren, you have any updates or any clarifications you'd like to make?
Yeah, I do have one clarification. On the NEBO unit in the packet, there are a couple different numbers. And one said 26 permits total, the other said 36. That should be 36. So just so everybody knows what they're voting for on the NEBO. Other than that, I'm sure we'll have a good discussion tonight. And so I think we can just get to it unless, well, obviously if the RAC has questions, that's what we're doing. So we can do that.
Okay, thanks, Darren. Any questions for Darren?
Darren, was the recommendation to make it so the people that had the multi-season tag and didn't harvest could hunt during the spot and stock?
Right, yeah. We've been asked for years. We didn't used to have a lot of harvest objective units for bear. And when we started changing that, people who drew that multi-season permit kept asking us, well, why can't we hunt? You know, we got a permit for the unit. We can hunt all the seasons. Why can't we hunt that open, that harvest objective unit? I couldn't think of a really good reason other than just the rule precluded it. So we're recommending we change the rule to allow that. So again, it'd be for people that draw a multi-season permit, allow them to hunt all, so we do have some For example, we have harvest objective bait seasons on some units, and they were precluded from that, and now they'd be able to hunt that with everybody else.
Awesome, thanks.
Actually, take it back, not bait seasons, hound seasons.
Can a person obtain a limited entry permit and also a spot and stock tag in the same year?
You can only have one bear permit unless you draw that. Well, and multi-season is one permit as well. But yeah, right now you couldn't get both.
Oh, you could get both?
Could not.
Could not.
Yeah.
Has there ever been any discussion about opening that up to where somebody who drew a bait tag could also either hunt with an unharvested tag or purchase a tag?
We
for the
haven't
spot and stock?
we haven't talked about that. No, I mean that if we're talking about most harvest objective seasons are during the fall, during the big game hunts. I think if someone had an unfilled tag, and again, the quota is sort of the relief valve on that season. So obviously, if the quota is met, it closes. I don't know that there's necessarily any reason that we take a little bit of a tweak to the rule, but if the RAC wanted to talk about that, and we could certainly take a look at it.
Anyone else have questions? I have a question, Darren, regarding the baiting stuff. Would the division have any exceptions to making an exception for private lands where they could bait longer, or, through that fall season, where they have, for instance, a landowner has some problem bears. They're not able to get those taken care of through a spot and stock. Do you see any complications there by putting an exception for private lands?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the biggest concerns when the Bear Committee met, there are a couple things we want to tackle. One was just try to simplify things and make the seasons relatively uniform across the state. And then we had some concerns in the fall with the overlap between hounds and bait season. And so what we recommended was to move the hound season earlier, eliminate the bait in the fall. With regards to private land, I think I'd be nervous about opening it back up to bait during the big game season, especially with spot and stock in the field at the same time. But I think on private land, you've got some access limitations just based on the fact that you've got to get permission to hunt. And that would probably be less of a problem. So hunt structure isn't in the rule. It would just require us to have an exception for private land, that the person could use bait on private land during those fall spot. It wouldn't be a spot and stock season on private land at that point, but we could probably address it that way. But I'm not worried about the issues that we discussed in the committee. Probably would not be a particular concern during that fall season on private land. So that'd be a possibility, sure.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Darren? Not, we'll open up questions from the audience.
So the bear plan includes 3 metrics to basically determine the recommendations for tags. Based on these metrics, 60% of the units statewide should call for a decrease. Sow harvest, being one of those metrics, is extremely high, even with the hunters primarily looking for mature boars. And speaking with several biologists around the state, myself and several others, it's pretty clear that the biologists are not necessarily given fair input on these and somewhat being overruled in places. A lot of these signs point that some of this is driven by maybe the legislators and wool growers. Is that correct?
We did have a hearing on the Capitol, probably been a couple months now. Some of the concerns that were expressed to us they all revolved around conflict. And there were some legislators that were concerned about impacts to livestock producers, particularly sheep. It seems like bears don't impact cattlemen as much. They'll kill a calf here or there, but typically it's sheep that really get hit. And then the other concern was just conflict in general. If we've got units where we've had high conflict with people, bears in campgrounds over and over again, that we ought to be taking a look at that and trying to minimize those types of conflicts. And then obviously we talk to constituencies and throughout the process, but those are some things that we from the Salt Lake office asked our biologists to look at when they made these recommendations this time around. We asked them, if they had domestic sheep allotments, to manage those units for a little bit higher take and to try to reduce densities on those units. And the other caveat was, if you've got high human bear conflict of other kinds, you probably ought to be thinking about maybe you've got, your numbers might be too high. You probably ought to try and reduce those. So having said all that, yeah, our biologists did receive some instructions to look at that based on some of the feedback that we've been getting. And so that factored in to the recommendations.
Okay. And a lot of the conflict with just the general public and people has been happening in the month of July. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's usually a summer thing. And so we did have a few units. We actually included a July season to try to address that. So if you see a unit in the recommendation as a July season, that's a good indication that those are ones where we had some concerns about just general, recreators and bears coming into conflict.
Okay, so the public conflict is right after a month of feeding the bears by the public.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And then can you provide the graph that just shows the general statewide population trend of the bears?
Yeah. Let me Okay. For some reason, I can't manipulate that mic. It's just dark. I mean, I can see that it came up. Should I present the whole screen rather than the window? Yeah. We'll get it, sorry. All right, yeah, that's it. Perfect. There we go. Let me just do a quick explanation of this. So this is an estimate of the trend in adult bears from 2000 through 2021. It's based on age at harvest. So we put all those ages in a matrix and then we back calculate. And since we don't see a lot of yearlings and cubs, and cubs are illegal to take, and a lot of people are not selecting yearlings, at least most of the time, we usually are a couple years behind. We can only estimate up through, in this case, 2021. So this would be adult males 2 years and older, and adult bears 2 years and older. And again, here, I think I would just want to say the trend is probably the most critical thing. This doesn't include any kind of natural mortality that wouldn't change the curve. It would just move the numbers up and down. So this is a good indication just of what we estimate our population statewide has been doing over the last 21 years or so. This indicates probably we're at a high point between 2013 and 2018, and since then things have been declining, and that some of that's probably drought related. Our big populations in the southern part of the state were probably affected by the drought we had during those years. They weren't producing cubs because they just weren't getting enough to eat. So
Okay, yeah, and you answered a lot of what I was gonna ask about it. What just was to help point out and explain to everybody that this is, this trend is based on backdating 3 years.
Yeah.
And so essentially, real time right now, we're another 3 years downward. So just, that was what I was gonna have your help to explain.
Yeah,
So.
sure.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay, we have some comment cards. Start with Cody and then Brett Guyman.
Guess I should have stayed here. Cody Webster, Utah Houndsman Association. Many of you have probably seen last year, the last couple of years, there's been a lot of attacks nationwide on our rights to hunt. Our neighbors in Colorado recently had a major fight that they had to fight to preserve their lion and bobcat hunting. Luckily, for now, they won that, but they won largely based on the fact that it was science-based wildlife management. That was the key factor that preserved that hunting. In Utah, we're running straight away from science-based, especially with lions, bobcats, bears. House Bill 469 on lions was a huge slap in the face to science-based management, and we're headed down that same route with our bears. What we're doing with our bears mirrors 15 years ago of lions. I was in these meetings, as a lot of you were, and we started with draw units and then a few harvest objective and then some more and then some unlimited, and pretty soon we've got House Bill 469. We're headed down that same path, and then we need to stop it before we get there. Last year we came to these meetings to ask for a decrease on many of the units. We came to a consensus that the data, the science showed that these units needed the decrease, but it wasn't the year that the plan was up. So we were told, come back next year when the plan's new. We need to update in accordance with the 3-year cycle, but the data does show we need decreases. Here we are at the year that we need to change. And instead of following those decreases, all of a sudden we're just changing management strategy to allow or increase more tags. With the fact that science has not backed many of these tag increases, a few of the units really jump out. The first I want to mention is the boulder. The boulder had a 48% female harvest, 0 recorded depredation, and the metrics on deer and elk show that they're doing great. So the bears largely don't live in the area where the sheep live. There's been no payout to wool growers for depredation there. But we're having to change the management plan just to hide the fact that the bear population is declining in order to appease our representatives, such as Carl Albrecht, who is making this push on behalf of the wool growers there. So we'd ask that we keep the boulder as a moderate harvest and base the tag numbers according to the science on the moderate harvest strategy. The Book Cliffs is another unit where the shifting management strategy is without a reason. As someone that probably spends more time than most on the Book Cliffs, I can promise that the bears on the Book Cliffs are significantly down from what they were 10, 15 years ago. That graph we just seen is showing that. There's no depredation on the Book Cliffs. There's no payout. The only wool growers on that is winter range when the bears are in their dens primarily anyway. There's a large complex unit. The deer and elk, we come to one meeting and we're told the fawns and the calves are doing great. So it's hard to then turn around and, when we're talking about something else, then all of a sudden the data is different. If anything must be done on the Book Cliffs, it might be time to consider some unit boundary structure changes. Primarily, even if we increase tags, the hunters are still going to hunt the same areas that has the low bear numbers, and such as the bears that get into this valley and cause problems, you could offer unlimited on the Book Cliffs, and it's not going to help here. If we have to do something to help the valley here for the farmers here, we've got a Floyd Canyon, rattlesnake, whichever species you want to call the different boundary, but we can, divide that out and maybe address that differently. That's the only way you're going to get any harvest there that's going to help the valley problem here. So we ask that at a minimum, you vote to hold the tag numbers to last year under the moderate or the light strategy, which the Book Cliffs was on. But really the data points that should have a decrease. To jump from a light harvest strategy on the Book Cliffs to a liberal is a huge jump. I believe it's about a 40 tag increase. That's a big tag increase when you're talking about bears. That's not deer, elk tags. That's bears. The last unit I want to bring up is the South Manti. It's yet again a unit where the tag increases are directly to cater to the same interest groups. The tricky part with the Manti is the best season to target the bears that would cause the depredation problems would be the spring. Your spot and stock and bait are more likely to harvest smaller bears, sows, especially the spring houndsman can be more selective. We obviously have had lots of discussions that we don't want the houndsman increase in the fall during the big game hunts. I get that. The problem we've got is the Forest Service locks the public off the public property during the spring season. Most of the hunters are forced into small select areas, and those areas aren't where the sheep are ran during the summer. So we're really not going to help the sheep if we can't put the pressure on and be able to hunt the areas that those bears might actually cause a problem. So we ask that we not increase on that unit and maintain the moderate strategy as it has been in the past. Summary is basically to keep the Boulder, the Book Cliffs, Bitter Creek, and the South Manti under the harvest strategies that they've had, and set the permit numbers according to the data and the science that would coincide with those previous management strategies. Again, I urge that we just keep with science-based management. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Cody. I let him run a little long there. I failed to make a statement that people will be given, if you're representing a group, as Cody was, you'll be given 5 minutes. If you're representing yourself, we'll give you 3 minutes. So please kind of keep an eye on the timer. Brett.
Cody's kind of illustrated my some of my points as well. I just want to add, I want to put this into perspective for those of you who may not be that familiar with bears. I'm going to relate it to deer. And I like to talk in terms of percentages. The percentage of increase. So I'm going to talk about South Manti bears. I'm also going to talk about South Manti deer for just a second. South Manti, or not South Manti deer. It's the Manti, but it encompasses the South Manti bear unit. But our data was showing in 2021, 2022 that there needed an increase. That increase was 2.6% on deer. The following years, 22 to 23, they were still showing that the deer needed an increase, so they increased the deer numbers by 6.4%. When I did the numbers based on the bear increases between last year and this year, it's a 56% increase. I think the plan calls for up to 50%. The reason my numbers are off, I'm assuming, is because I'm not accounting for the conservation tags that the proclamation wouldn't have in them, which is where I picked my numbers from. So big jumps in wildlife management, in my opinion, are a problem. And as Cody stated, I think if we could get back to sound wildlife management, not influenced by extraneous influences, rather than sound data, that would be great. And in 3 years, when we look at these numbers again, I hope you disregard the comment that I just made. And when it's showing a very high, female harvest, let's reduce it another 56% and get back to where it probably should be. So we got to start somewhere with a base. Just getting back to data management or wildlife management based on data rather than outside influences would be wonderful. Not just in bears, but in all species. Thanks.
Thanks, Brett. Guy, you're up. You're the last comment card that we have for this agenda item, unless I've missed one.
Guy Webster, here speaking on behalf of myself, my children, and most importantly, my grandchildren. I've been in hounds for over 40 years. I've represented the hounds groups since the early 90s. I think I have a little bit of background in hound hunting, bears, lions, and stuff. And this is really disturbing to look at. You look at this new plan, there is not one unit in the entire state that's under a light management objective. We see the trend of bear populations decreasing, but yet we do not have one single unit on here that does light management. Everything is either moderate or liberal, and the bulk of them have jumped to liberal. This is not sound biology. It's been illustrated. We've got certain legislators that have made threats to the fish and game. If they don't just go and annihilate the bears like they're trying to do with the lions, they're going to run bills. The fish and game needs to stand up to these legislatures and say, hey, if we want to be able to keep our sports, keep things, we've got to have biology to back it. Colorado was a prime example of that necessity of biology. Otherwise, it's going to be lost. These increases are just unfathomable. I mean, there's not rhyme or reason and stuff. The wool growers and things, they're going to cry, they're going to scream, the cattlemen. I challenge how many of them are actually these cattle people that say they've got a bear kill that's actually a bear kill or not just a bear's found that. And same with the sheep. I've found more of their sheep guard dogs killing their sheep than they'll ever admit to, and a bear may come in and clean them up and things. If you want to address some of that, maybe we need to look at some structure of season changes. The Manti, prime example, houndsmen can't get on the mountain because the forest is locked prior to them being able to get there. Let's move that season to where they're still there, able to run their dogs through June and stuff, address that. Same with the book cliffs. We talk about fawn survival. Well, we close the hound hunting about the time you're going to start fawning. Let's let the dogs be up there, keep them bears dispersed, not just build going on a fawning or calving ground and annihilate those that they're so-called getting accused of, not necessarily happening, but that's what the accusations are. There's other things to do besides just increase tags. I'm an outfitter, but I haven't taken a lion hunter in 7, 8, 9 years. There's not lions left to take. I'm not going to take a yearling female and tell somebody a trophy. We're getting the same way with bears and stuff. I focus on deer and elk, and if I thought bears and lions were the prime problem of deer and elk, I'd be the first one here saying we need to decrease bears and lions. Thank you.
Thanks, Guy. Okay, that's our last comment card, so we'll open it up for comments from the RAC.
Or Darren run off too. Oh, there he is.
Small enough to hide anywhere.
I guess I just had a few more questions. So
Sure.
First of all, since it's fresh on my mind, what would it look like to allow hound hunters to run through June? Obviously, it goes right over the top of the bay season.
Yeah, I mean, we just did a bear committee last year, and a lot of these seasons reflect recommendations from that committee. We wanted to eliminate hounds and bait in the field at the same time. That was a concern our law enforcement had. And, it's illegal to chase off a bait. And if you've got bait and a bear goes through a bait, your hounds are going to go through the bait. And it was just, so we agreed to overlap one day on Memorial Day, and then that'd be all the overlap we'd have between those two first seasons. We did amend the fall the hound season and moved it back a little bit to get it out of the archery seasons a little bit. And that was another compromise that the group came to. So having said that, there's nothing, we could look at seasons, we could look at other things if the RAC wants to try to think about some of that stuff. The other marching orders we got on that committee was let's make things simpler. We can have one season, don't have different seasons all across the state. Let's try and make things more uniform. Yeah, if we've got a big snow year and those gates are locked, it does make it tough to get up there early. So it shortens up that hound season in the spring. But then they get August, and that's not probably an ideal hot time. It's hot and it's hard to cut a track and et cetera. So definitely trade-offs.
Yeah, and that's, I can definitely see where you're coming from where, bait hunting is not going to disperse the bears off the funny grounds, right? Like hounds would. So I can see that being an advantage for sure. But I can see the issues there. One other question. So of these units, I know there's been neonate studies conducted in many units across the state. Do you know which units those were conducted in?
I'll defer to the region a little bit. I know, so we did have neonate data on the book list, and that was primarily one of the reasons we recommended some changes there. We did see fairly high fawn mortality when that study was going on to bears. Comments were made that there isn't a lot of depredation. That's true. I don't think they run a lot of sheep on the book list, so we don't see a lot of depredation. So that'd be a deer issue that we were looking at there. LaSalle's kind of falls into, I don't remember, we have 2 years of LaSalle's neonate data. So I know the first year it was about a quarter of fawns we lost to bears and another quarter to lions of those that were collared. I don't know what it looks like now, if maybe Ian or Dustin could talk to that if they want to. So there are three things we were looking at. Do we have domestic sheep allotments? And do we have conflict? And then the other one would be, do you have concerns about big game? Generally, bears are not going to be a problem for big game. They do eat some, but if you do get high density units where there's a lot of bears, they can, at least on these high density units like the LaSalle's and the Book Cliffs, you can start seeing some impacts. So
I was just wondering how much the results of the neonate study factored into some of these that made a large jump from a light to a liberal or even moderate.
yeah, so Book Cliffs would have been one that'd been the primary thing that we were looking at. And that, to be fair, that data is a couple years old now, but when we were running those studies on the Book Cliffs, that's what we were seeing.
I was looking at that population graph, and obviously 2021 is what you have as your last date, which is you explained as being the delay of people harvesting their bears. I guess when I see that graph, I do see a decline, but I also see those years as being heavy drought. I mean, 2021 was the year of the Pat Creek fire, June 9th. We had probably the largest fire on LaSalle's. So it'd be nice to have some better data to see, since we've had wetter years, if that's actually trending upward. I know it suggested that it's continually trending down, but that's just not very good data, I think, to look at with how our population is with bears.
That's why it's not included as a parameter in the plan, just because we can't get, sort of up to date, but it's something to take into consideration along with other things. If you do look at the, females in the harvest and adult males, you really got to look at it unit by unit, but most of the numbers would indicate that those trends will continue to go down.
Darren?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Before you take
Yeah,
off,
no, good.
does the division have any even preliminary data that would indicate, what the recruitment is for bears for the more current years? Is that?
Yeah, so we do look at, we, in the past, we've done a lot of denning and trying to look at, what kind of cubs we see in the den. The problem with that data is that it usually was not based on a whole lot of bears. And so it was difficult to say definitively, what that means. If you have 2 bears and one has a couple cubs and the other one doesn't, what does that mean for the unit? Not a lot. Statewide, it might mean more, but again, things vary. You can have drought in one place and other factors in another. So we don't do that quite as much anymore. We are looking at some new methodologies to try and get a better idea of just overall numbers. USU is doing a study right now on the NEBO, looking at multiple methods to look at carnivores to see if we can get better density information. So camera traps, scat dogs, hair snares. If we can find a method that's cost effective and time, not too time consuming, that's something we could incorporate into our management. But they've got one more field season and then they'll be writing up results. So we're kind of waiting for that to come before we can get more. So it's tough, predator with bears, you can't go count them. And I think our sportsmen have a good feel for what's going on the ground, at least where they hunt. And so I would definitely take that into consideration.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess I have a question and I know we're past questions, but I guess question
all right.
came as we sat here.
It's kind of how it goes.
We're seeing the trend is going down. There's maybe some indicators that it's going to continue to go down over the next couple of years of data that comes in. So we have all this down, but then as has been pointed out, overall, we're increasing tags. Don't we feel like we're saying one thing and then doing another?
I think we need to be a little bit careful about overgeneralizing across all seasons and hunts. And it's important to look at the units and how those, if they increased, where those were added. If we have spot and stock seasons with low success rate, you might need to actually increase your quota a fair amount in order to get the harvest you're looking for. And so it looks like a big jump. And so again, if we've got specific questions, we can certainly get into that and kind of look at how those permits were distributed. And I'm happy to do that if we want to look at that.
I guess I got one more question then for Darren. I mean, you started tonight a little bit talking about private lands, and there was a question asked about private lands. And, I brought this up before, I bring it up cautiously, but I understand that if we don't want to run dogs on private lands, and they can run from one piece of private land to another. But if we're having conflict on private lands, or we have large densities of bears that are held up on private lands, I really think the state needs to consider like possibly a CWMU tag for bears for a bait season on private lands, right? And those operators could maybe be the ones that set up bait stations and they run them for their clients, and then they have the people who draw get to go and hunt those same bait stations that are members of the public. I don't know that I really want to advocate for an expansion of the CWMU program, but something like that or similar, that let's get some harvests on private lands for bears, especially if, I know we run a lot of livestock on our public lands, but if private landowners are saying, hey, on my private land, I'm having conflict, how are we supposed to get in there and kill them if all the tags are public? And again, I'm not necessarily saying I also want to see a bunch of private land only bear permits either, but it sounds like there might be an opportunity there for the public to get a greater chance to hunt and for conflict to be resolved.
Yeah, so we do. We have tools on the depredation side that we can issue permits and they can hunt. They can use whatever method they need to in order to address problems. I think the gap is maybe they're not having depredation, but they got a lot of bears and they're concerned and they want to maybe keep bears on their private property a little bit lower, and also it might be a way to afford a public hunter an opportunity to take the bear rather than just having UDAF do it or us. And so, making an exception in the fall for private lands is probably not a bad idea, whether that's a CWMU thing or just an exception in the rule. And I tend to want to, let's do the easy thing first. And if that's a problem, we can maybe get a little bit more restrictive on how we do it. but we're happy to look at that. I don't know. if
Yeah, and
there's
I
a
think,
reason
the CWMU program, if you're gonna take a piece of chunk of land and make it its own unit, that gives you an opportunity to manage to something different.
Yeah, and I agree. And baiting would be the way to do that. Not, I think hounds
Yeah.
would be tough because when they go, I don't want to create the impression that people don't control their dogs, because some guys are really good and they can call them back, but it does become a problem if the bear leaves and could potentially be the concern. So.
Hey, Darren, circling back to the tag numbers and the tag increases. I know one of the units that got brought up was the LaSalle. It's got going to be quite a big increase, I guess. Another unit down in that area is the San Juan that's getting a decrease. Those happen to be two units that have had neonate studies. I'd hate to put our biologists on the spot, but they're usually.
I think we should put him on.
They're
the spot.
usually Johnny on the spot.
Yeah,
you know?
let's,
So
because I don't know the answer. We can have
if
them
that data
speak
is
to that.
available to just see what those studies are doing,
Sure.
I think it might be useful to look at that and help it put into perspective as if we're actually managing by data or some other means.
Yeah. Okay.
Just on. Thanks, you. Yeah, so we've had the neonate studies on San Juan and LaSalle for 2 years now. And so 2023, we had 27 of the fawns we caught died. And of the 27, 5 were attributed to bear predation. So it's like 19% of the fawns. I will preface that, and that's on the LaSalle. I don't know if I said that, but I will preface that with, like, if we had found, that was before I had started, obviously, but if we had found just a collar, there was some debate about whether that was bear or not. So if there's bear sign in the area, it was called bear predation. So whether that fawn was actually killed by a bear or not, it was attributed to it, but just keep that in mind. And then in 2024, we had 25 mortalities and only 1 was confirmed bear predation. So just 4%, 1 of the 25. And then on San Juan, 23, it was the same deal. We had 27 mortalities, 5 were attributed to bear predation. So that's just, 19%. And then 2024, 2 of 31 was attributed to bear predation. So we went from 10 fawns that were attributed to bear predation in 2023 across both units to just 3 in 2024. And I can speak to kind of the recommendation on San Juan and LaSalle too, if that was part of the question. So on San Juan, right, we've been managing under that moderate harvest level for a long time now, right? We've got pretty robust bear populations on both units. And as part of that moderate harvest, we try to manage for 25 to 35% of the harvest being adult male and 30 to 40% of that harvest being sows. And we managed to, as with deer and elk, we try and take the 3-year average into consideration. And on the San Juan, over the past 3 years, it's been 22.9% adult male harvest, which is under that harvest objective for males. And it's been just about 43% female. So we're under on males and over on females, which is why, like, in that situation, our kind of call is that we have up to 20% adjustment. Looking across the 3 years, so 2022, 16% of the harvest was male, so significantly under, and 45% was female. We were over on that. 2023, 15% was male and 55% was female. And then in 2024, it was a bit of a switch. We saw 41% was male and 28% was female. So we saw that swap from male to female. So because the last year was good, it kind of balanced out that average. So we opted for, that 10% decrease rather than the full 20% decrease on San Juan. So that explains that. And LaSalle's, it was 27.5% male harvest. So we were within objective on that, and 44% female on the 3-year average. So we were a little over on females, but because we were within average on males, we opted to keep that as a stable permit recommendation. That was a lot of numbers. I hope that answers some of the questions on that.
I didn't expect you to have that much information. Right at your
I was
fingertips, so
prepared for the
that's
question,
awesome.
Scoot. I knew
Thanks.
it was coming. Yeah. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Any other comments or questions?
Yes, I guess I did have a question or a couple. One, to go back to maybe one of the comments, it does seem that all the light management now is either moderate or liberal. Did we just get things wrong? Like, I guess I'm curious on how a plan can now drop one of the management options.
One of the things that we did in the management plan is allow a biologist to make decisions on their local units. And so used to have a certain number had to be in light, a certain number, no more than a certain number could be in liberal. We changed that. And so there's two things going on. We want our biologists to be able to look at what's going on in their units and be free to make decisions based on what they're seeing. But then there's also the other side of this is just, we get feedback at a statewide level too. And so we want to give them as much freedom as possible, but we also want them to be aware of issues as they're rising. So that's kind of where we landed. So as they make decisions across all the units, that's kind of where we wound up. So it doesn't mean that we couldn't use a light strategy. Typically, if you're using light, you want to be growing bears. And there probably are some units where that's appropriate. And again, as much as possible, we like to give our district biologists as much freedom to make those decisions. But again, we need to take into account other, we talked a little bit about, we want to let the biology have the final say on this. And I think, in a perfect world, that'd be great. But there's a big part of this that's social. And that's why we have public meetings, and obviously the RAC can ponder those things. And again, this is just a recommendation from us. So you can recommend something different to the board if you want to. I don't know if, hopefully, Dana, did that help at all? Or am I just rambling?
No, it helped. And then second question was, I really did appreciate the information that we just received for the San Juan and the LaSalle's. There were some large changes there on the book cliffs. Is there similar data or similar can you explain how the plan was used to develop those
right.
recommendations?
So on the book cliffs, both units, let me just make sure I'm looking at the right thing here. During the last 3-year period, we're managed at light. So the Bitter Creek South was adjusted to liberal, and the roadless area was adjusted to moderate. So that puts the parameters at, for adult male harvest, you want to see that under a liberal strategy be less than 25%. And for, sorry, I take that back. Make sure I'm looking at the right line. No, that's right. So adult males harvest should be less than 25%. It was on Bitter Creek South, it was 37%, so fairly high under that scenario. And then for the roadless area, it was 18.8% males, and it should be between 25 and 35. So that one was low. And then females should be between 40 and 45%. On Bitter Creek South, it was 20%. This is 3-year average, 20%, well, 19.4%. And on the roadless area, it was 44.4%. So if you change the strategy in the plan, you can adjust permits up to 50%. And so we ask our biologists to take all things into account, what they know about the unit, and then choose, but they're given a range to look at. So on Bitter Creek South, they could have adjusted permits up to 46, and on the roadless up to 12. It looks like on Bitter Creek, well, it gets complicated when you start talking about quotas, because quotas doesn't translate necessarily into permits, but they went from 91 to 120 on the book list, Bitter Creek South, and on the roadless from 24 to 30. And then if you want to, we can get in the weeds on how those were split between the different seasons.
I guess just to confirm, the changes were made to, I guess, increase the harvest percentage for both male and
Right.
female. Okay.
And again, that neonate data is the thing of concern that we were looking at there. So
And what are the neonate data for that one?
I don't have that in front of me. Go ahead. I'm gonna let you come up.
Yeah, so we're just looking at this, and the Northeast region really does these recommendations for the book cliff, so we're kind of playing off their coattails too, but it does, looks like 30% kind of average between the 3 years of having the neonate study on the book cliffs. And that was for fawns and calves.
30% mortality due to bear.
Yeah.
So I think the neonate data stuff is interesting, but I also think we focus a lot on deer and elk. And this is bears, and bears are gonna eat neonates. That's what they eat. So like we can sit here and talk about that stuff through the moon, but bears get to eat neonates. That's what they do. So I like to focus really on the population of the bears as we know it, and what that desired outcome for that population is, and not focus so much on the neonates. I mean, we can focus on things like depredation and stuff like that, conflict, but I really just think bears get to eat deer. That's part of being a bear, you know?
But if your bear population is too high in perspective to your other ungulates, they eat more than they normally do. So it could be out of perspective. That's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, I get that, but right now we're not seeing depredation in a lot of these units. Like we talked about, there's just not sheep, and if there weren't enough deer and elk, they'd be finding ways to eat more sheep. I know that when we look at the book cliffs, we've seen a real decline in our deer and elk population, so that's something to talk about. But looking at it broad base, I don't see how it correlates so much. I mean, we're very heavily focused on deer and elk just in Utah, period. But the bears get to eat deer and elk. We should kind of adjust to how the bears are eating elk, I think, more than we should adjust the bears.
Okay, I have a comment. Kind of going back to the private lands thing. I mean, I agree. I think that there needs to be something to allow some of these private landowners to be able to better take care of the issues there. I'm not going to make a motion, so if someone feels like they want to, a couple of things I want to point out. I think it's important. I've had some discussion with Darren about this prior to the meeting. And right now, just exactly how that looks probably isn't really defined. There's certain things that need to be considered. You know, we don't want to give so many tags or make a situation where all of the quota can be taken on private lands and exclude the public land hunters. So there's things like that that need to be worked through. Darren has promised that you know, we have some time to do that. One other thing I think that is important, if you make a motion, it's kind of a big change. And if it goes to the wildlife board and they feel that it's too big of a change to make without it going through the public process, we want to include in that motion to make sure that it gets put on the action item and brought back next year, so you don't have to wait full 3 year till the plan comes up again. So those are just some things that I think are important to keep in mind if you decide to make that motion. So any other comments?
I've got one kind of a question. the whole public, I guess. Is there not ways and means, if there's depredation on public lands, that landowner can call and get a response anytime on that specific item, can he not?
Yeah, they can. And basically by allowing a private lands exemption, so to speak, it allows for public hunters, whether it be, just people that are hunting on the private land, have permission to hunt there, but they have that opportunity. I mean, the landowner himself sees the problem. He can go out and kill the bear, report it. They have to come and take care of it. Creates a lot of headache, makes the landowner look bad in the eyes of the public. So I think the landowners themselves would rather have the option to let the public do that. And that's why I'm in favor of that. But there are some things still to be worked through. So. Okay, if there's no more comments,
Well, I guess I got one more comment. I'm
okay,
sorry.
Cash, go ahead.
I guess, what do I want to say? What I want to say here is I think it's really critical how we decide to manage our predators in this state. I can't emphasize that enough. Nothing gets, I'll just say, activists more fired up than predators, except maybe horses. So you got to be really cognizant of how you decide to manage it. You can get away with a lot with deer and elk, but you start talking about predators and horses, and then a lot of people will show up. So we got to be very careful how we decide to manage. I think the other thing is, I would just say, inherently in our management plans, we put a hierarchy on what is important. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's there. Stockmen win. They're top of the heap every time. We make a management plan geared around that. Then maybe in this state, we'll talk about elk and we'll talk about deer, and then bears end up somewhere down. But the bottom line is there's a hierarchy. You are somewhere on the totem pole, and the management plans reflect that. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. And I guess it depends on who you ask and what you hunt. But there is certainly a hierarchy. And so I think it's important is that we have management plans that are in the best interest of the wildlife, that are backed by science, and that if there is an opportunity for more harvest, whether that be on private or public, that we capitalize on that while we can, in the same time looking for the long-term investment of all future generations that we want to be able to go out and enjoy the outdoors. And that's just a bunch of overarching nice pie in the sky conversation. But I hope that the division would take into consideration what is best for the wildlife and the resource more than political sentiment. So that's the only other comment I've got.
And I'd have to say too, that's good comments. I appreciate that. A month ago, you guys all met here, and I feel bad I couldn't be here for the mule deer plan, especially where I was on the committee. But we learn a lot about what is affecting our deer herds, right? And that's one of the reasons we're doing those neonate studies. And it's not just geared around bears to prove that bears are doing it. It's whatever's doing it. Maybe there's one that proves that bears are not a factor, and then that would come into play in the numbers that we're putting out. But one thing we didn't have any power over is how many bear tags can be put out in the mule deer plan. That's not part of the mule deer plan. So as long as we're managing within biological, we're not wiping out the herds or damaging them to a point where the biology can't handle it. I think it is important to make sure that those are tied to other things, especially deer and elk in the state of Utah. Those are by far the two species that people hunt the most and care about the most and have the most input on.
Yeah, to that point, Scoot, I mean, and someone from the division, correct me if I'm wrong and if this has changed, but I know not too many years ago, the deer hunt and the elk hunt are the only hunts that actually make money for the state. Every other hunt that they manage costs more to manage than what those hunts bring in. So that's why there's that hierarchy, so to speak, I think, because those two species are the bread and butter of the division. so to speak, so. Okay, if that's the end of the comments, let's open it up for motions. And we can break it out separately, however we want to do that, so.
I did have one more comment. I'd just like to know what you guys' thoughts are on something I brought up earlier about the people that draw a limited entry bear tag. Is there a reason why we care or why it's important for them not to be able to go and purchase an over-the-counter spot and stock tag in that same year? And my thought is whether they harvest a bear or not during the limited entry, the quote is still the same. It doesn't increase bear harvest. It may increase people in the field chasing them, but I don't know I don't think crowding on spot and stock has ever been a real concern. I think it could benefit income. I think it could also make it to where that person who does draw a bait tag and it's the last day might choose to pass on a sow, knowing that they can maybe kill a boar later. Could be a good opportunity.
That's a good point, Scoot. Well, I have to ask a question for some clarification because are you suggesting that person who has a limited entry tag or say a baiting tag could purchase a second tag? Because right now their tags that they have don't allow them to hunt different seasons. So is that what you're suggesting, that they
Yeah,
could
no,
buy a
first-
second tag? And is there any statute or anything that forbids that?
Rule would only allow one bear per year. So if they were unsuccessful, there might be some opportunity there to tweak the rule to allow them to continue to hunt during an open spot and stock or harvest objective season. Right now, all bear permits are the same price. So I don't see that being necessarily as an issue, but we have been asked to see if we can work with the legislature to get a spot and stock tag reduced. And if that's the case, then we'll have to figure out how that all works out. But I don't think there's anything at the moment that, other than just you can only take, and I guess we could change the rule, allow a person take 2 bears. I don't think we would recommend that, but if you hadn't filled your tag, and we could probably make it allow, if that's something the RAC would want us to look at, we could certainly look at that. I'm sure there's some things I'm not thinking of, at the moment, but we
Yeah,
certainly-
that's
I don't-
useful.
I wouldn't say no just up front.
Yeah, and maybe I'm not married to the second bear idea. Like maybe it just makes sense to let them hunt the spot and stock. And especially where their limited entry tag cost more than, if that changes, it would cost more than the spot and stock would. And the primary reason, I guess, would be to allow them another opportunity, but also I think it would keep them from harvesting a sow towards the end of the hunt if they knew that they had an opportunity to keep going out in the spot and stock. And that doesn't mean they won't go harvest a sow during the spot and stock, but.
Let me just add one thing. I just thought of this. There isn't any guidance, or there isn't anything in the plan or the rule that says so many percentage of permits have to go into each hunt type. And so conceivably we could issue more multi-season permits, and in that case they would be able to hunt all 3. And so that might be another way to get at that. But anyway, just food for thought.
Hey, Scoot, can I just clarify something? You're suggesting to just roll that over, so then if you don't harvest during the multi-season, you can go into spot and stock, not purchase another spot and stock tag, correct?
Yeah, I kind of migrated into that after I found out it's in the rule, but they can't kill 2 bears in 1 year.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you hear so much about, that's the big social pressure that I hear, is that the DWR is just out to make as much money as possible. So I think if we can make that a rule to make it like, if you don't harvest, there's an objective, you can go to the spot and stock instead of buying another tag. I feel like the public wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, I don't feel like it would really increase the perceived hunting pressure on those. I just think it would be good for those reasons I mentioned, I think. But I want to hear other people's ideas, because there might be something I'm not seeing here that could make it a bad idea.
I certainly wouldn't be opposed to that. I think it's not a bad idea. I think, again, where it's something new that hasn't gone through the public process, if you decide to make a motion, probably, same thing. Give the board the option if they feel it's too big of a change to not go through that public process, to have it put on the action item to come back next year. Otherwise, it'll be tabled for the 3-year. So
I guess for me, Scoot, to answer your question, I don't, and I think we kind of landed on this here at the end as you were going along, but I wouldn't have a problem with someone who didn't harvest on a permit that they already draw on to go and hunt the spot and stock season. I don't really care for the idea where they purchase another one. I mean, and unless we're going to start opening that up for a lot of species, because I'd love to somehow be able to have more than one buck tag in a year or one bull tag in a year. So, I mean, try to stay more consistent with that, I'd be more interested in the conversation of, hey, you didn't fill it. That's a bummer. There is this spot and stock season at the end that you can go do, and you can use your same tag for that. I wouldn't have a problem with that. And like I said, I think there's a lot of benefits from it. If there's a quota, we're managing that quota. What difference does it make, right? I mean, it takes a while to draw a bear tag. And so it'd be nice to know that you might have more than one chance. So I would be open to it in that form.
okay. Let's see if we can get some motions thrown out on the table.
Well, I guess since we're on that topic, I'll just make a motion before we do the whole plan that we allow anybody who's obtained a limited entry permit and not harvested an animal to hunt the spot and stock season.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Scoot. You get good with that motion?
So anyone who has obtained a limited entry permit and not harvested an animal to be allowed to hunt the spot and stock season?
Can I get a quick clarification? Would that mean they could hunt any open unit that was during the spot and stock, or just the unit that they drew the tag for? That's probably something that, I don't know that matters one way or the other, but it'd be nice to know what you
I mean,
want.
the way that those spot and stock tags are is any open unit, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's a good question. What do you think's best, Darren?
I don't think it matters, whatever your preference is.
I think it might overcomplicate it if we confine them to the same unit, but if that makes more sense, then that would be okay too. Right? I would
think-
say just hunt.
I was gonna say, law enforcement would probably want to weigh in, but it seems like as long as it was clear what was allowed, I think they'd probably be okay, but they may have feedback. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Dustin, you act like you have a comment.
I'm sure there are things we're not thinking. I don't know if it matters or not, but that hound season that goes into November, so those guys may hold out there. Does that matter or anything? They're not going to harvest on?
They might.
On
Yeah,
the-
they might wanna wait. I don't speak.
Maybe-
Sorry.
The current proposal on the table is allowing that or proposes to allow that for multi-season tags. So what is the proposal
So,
suggesting in that?
yeah, so if you have a multi-season permit, it's a little different. It's just that, they could hunt all the seasons, and so they may wait till later or whatever. But again, people were just saying, well, why can't we hunt? We got a permit for the unit. We can hunt multiple seasons. Why can't we hunt a harvest objective season? And I felt like that was a good question, and there probably isn't any reason not to allow that. I think maybe what Dustin was thinking is that, if you're thinking that, if a person has a hound permit for the fall, for August, they do have a little portion in November. Most of our bears are starting to den up that late, and we don't see a lot of harvest that late, but there's a possibility they may wait, but I don't know that that's a huge concern, but yeah.
So it may prevent some of those who want to hunt that later hunt from actually going on the spot and stock, but having that option, I don't see that
think,
being a downside. They could go do that spot and stock hunt. Now, is there any where the limited entry hunt is only the later season?
Yeah, so I mean, limited entry tags as they stand now would be specific to a season. So, but that fall hunt is split. So if you draw that tag, you can hunt August and November. So they'd sandwich that spot and stock season with that permit. So again,
But the dates don't overlap the spot and stock season, right? So it's still pretty easy to distinguish
right,
where one
yeah.
starts and the other ends.
I'd say, I'm comfortable with the RAC making a recommendation. Obviously, we'll take a look at it and figure out. I'm sure there's some things we're not thinking of tonight, and we can look at all that stuff. So when it comes up to the board, we maybe have some other things to add.
Okay, thanks. So we have a motion on the table. Good point. I mean, those are some of the things that, obviously making a motion at this point, there's some things that'll have to be, I think the division's got a month between now and the board meeting. So some of that can be worked through, and if not, it can be put on the action item and brought back next year. So.
I mean, wouldn't it make sense though, if you had a limited entry tag for the Book Cliffs or LaSalle's, that you could only spot and stock hunt those? I mean, that's what's written on your tag. If we're not printing off new tags, I mean, we could limit it to that as well.
I honestly, to me, I'm indifferent on that one. And so I think it's whatever makes the most sense, whatever's easier for law enforcement. So I think I would stick with the motion and leave that open, to tell you the truth, as I take it to the board. Whatever makes the most sense. Whatever's most easily enforceable and doesn't cause issues with what Cody's talking about,
Okay, makes sense. I think, like Darren said, keep it as simple as we can without convoluting everything. So we do pretty good at that sometimes. So we have a motion on the table. It's been seconded. Kirk. Any more discussion on the motion?
I've got one comment.
Okay.
If the public consensus seems to be to reduce numbers, why are we giving some people a second opportunity as opposed to one opportunity to kill a bear?
I don't know that opportunity changes the numbers, because if they harvest a bear, say a limited entry hunter is unsuccessful on his limited entry hunt, he hunts the harvest objective, it's still going to count towards that harvest objective. So it doesn't add permit numbers, it just gives more opportunity. Does that help?
Yeah, but it gives him a second chance is all.
True.
I could kind of understand what you're saying though, because we don't base our tag numbers off of 100% success. So we're basing tag numbers off the fact that we know that some people won't be successful. So if we throw in an extra season where we may be increasing that success, thus throwing off our numbers on the tags that we put out.
Yeah, and the second one's on a quota, right? And so there's pretty good pressure on that anyway, as far as how many people are out there. The first, my thought is it might make somebody not kill a bear towards the end that they wouldn't have killed otherwise in that higher success ratio hunt. And then they would potentially carry over into a spot and stock, which is obviously a much lower success. But knowing that they have that opportunity, they might not just shoot just to shoot, that's thought. So it could be actually working the other direction, potentially.
It's a great social experiment, eh?
Any more discussion on the motion? Okay, if not, let's ask for a vote. We'll start with Kirk.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
No.
Darren
Yes.
and Steve.
No.
Yeah. Two in a row, two meetings in a row. So, You know, we just got done with some experiments with the deer plan. I don't see a lot of downside with giving these guys that opportunity. There is concern that it could skew numbers, but I think we'd see that in time to make adjustments if need be. So I'm gonna say yes. So that one passes 5-4. Okay, next motion.
I'll try one, see where it goes. I'd like to make a motion that the division come up with a plan to provide private land bear hunting opportunities that help meet management objectives and also provide opportunity to the public. And that those recommendations would come around next year at this time.
Now, if things can be worked out to where it's presented at the board, it could be passed this year, but it's up to you if you just want to put that on an action item, or if you want to try and have it.
I'm gonna do an action item because I hope that I hope there'll be a whole committee for it. So yeah, I want the public to have some input on whatever we're gonna be doing on where the private land's gonna get the benefit of a state resource. So I'll stick with my motion the way it was.
Okay, so the motion is to ask basically ask the wildlife board to put this on an action item for the division to come up with a plan that gives some type of an exemption for the public or private lands.
Yeah, I think the way I said it was that creates private land bear hunting opportunities that help meet management objectives and also provide opportunity to the public.
All that? Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second that, and hopefully the public tags are pretty high in that if it gets approved.
Okay, have a motion by Cash, seconded by Charles. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll call for a vote. Kirk?
Yes.
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 Steve
Yes.
and Darren.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we have the remainder of the proposal that still needs to be addressed. Do we have any changes, modifications? Any motions regarding the remainder?
I move to accept the rest of the plan as presented.
Okay, motion by Scoot to accept the remainder of the plan as presented. We have a second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Cash. Any discussion on the motion? You ready for a vote? Okay, go ahead.
No.
Yes.
Turn it off. Yes.
Yes.
No.
No.
Steve
Yes.
and Darren.
No.
If I was premature in putting that out there and you guys wanted something, something else in the mix that you want to talk about.
Well, I can say at least my no vote is I haven't received much public input on this, honestly. I had 3 people show up to this RAC meeting who listed some units they'd want to see differently. They gave good reasons why they'd want to see that differently. And I'm here to represent sportsmen. And if I'm getting the only sportsmen that I'm getting feedback from it on are telling me they want to see something different, then that's what I'm here to represent.
Okay,
And I'm kind of on the same page. It looks to me, if this just came up like this, I think it would be advisable if we could to kick it down the road and do a little more analytical on it all and get a little more feedback if possible before we make such a decision, I guess. Yeah.
So with that in mind, I could vote yes and end this conversation, but I will vote no so that we can have some further discussion and entertain other motions. So that motion fails 5-4.
I'll have a comment and then do a motion. Especially what Brett said, that's a huge increase. I mean, percentage wise on the manti specifically. And I know he spends a lot of time up there. I don't know that and I understand there's some side rails in the management plan, but I think this is swinging from way too high on the manti specifically. So keeping that where it was last year, well, maybe I will. I make a motion that on the manti, the permits remain where they were last year.
One question I have for Darren, that where it shows like a 50% increase or whatever that increase, that's over a 3-year period. Is that correct? Or is that year to year?
It's year to year. So the way it works is if you change from one strategy to another, you can adjust permits within that 50% range. So the biologist will choose what he wants, and then that'll be the next 3-year permit numbers per year. One thing maybe to consider as you're thinking about this is that, well, if you're going to leave it the same, that would mean that the management strategy would stay the same, and that may have some implications about leaving tags the same. If you change the management strategy, that may require some different adjustments depending on how they fall out. And we could look at that if you want to, but
so specifically,
I don't want to overcomplicate things either. So
then to stay specifically on the manti, what are the exact reasons that we jumped?
Domestic sheep conflict.
How many domestic sheep were paid out?
Let me look, unless somebody's got that by county. I'll look it up here.
Yeah, I appreciate the extra discussion, Eric, because a lot of the units within our district or whatever had some huge changes. And so understanding the why, I think would be really important for this group, and that hasn't been given.
Sure, let's, we wanted to be out of here by 8 o'clock, Anna, but this is important.
Hey,
So
you voted no.
let's take,
Right.
now let's take the time to look at the data so that we can make educated decisions.
I'll look it up. I was just told that it was domestic sheep, actual payout, verified losses were low. But
yeah, so
in general, what we ask our biologists to look, if they had domestic sheep allotments, that we should manage that at a liberal rate. So that's why they made that decision. Obviously, the RAC can recommend
yeah,
whatever
so
you want.
I think I will stick with that motion. And reason being, I understand there's pressure from the legislature and generally that pressure hasn't resulted in great things. And I feel like this is our moment to have this process and public input. And I think that the manti specifically, that's my motion, should remain exactly where it was on the light strategy or whatever it was, because nothing's really changed except for a legislature decided that he thinks that because sheep are present, we should be killing 40 more bears on the unit. And I don't agree with that.
Hey, Kurt, the houndsman got up and I listed, they've asked for the boulder to be moved to moderate, Book Cliffs to light, and South Manti to moderate. Was I correct in saying that? Is that okay to include in your motion? Is that something you would consider?
So we can make other motions for different units if you want. Kurt's motion is specifically for the manti. So,
Are you proposing
to remain at 2023 levels, 2024 levels? You said last year. I don't know what last year meant.
Where they were, because it was at a.
So
it
is your
was at
motion
a-
to keep the
It was
tag
at a
numbers?
light strategy.
So,
yeah.
so your motion is to keep the same hunt strategy
Yes,
and same permit numbers?
yes, because nothing's really changed.
Okay, just want to clarify that.
I'll second that motion. And I might make a comment at the same point. I don't know about sheep specifically, but I know about cattle, and I don't believe over the last 20 years there's been a confirmed bear kill on cattle. In my experience, I haven't seen one. And it's just boots on the ground. There's no data collected on that, but I don't believe they bother cows, period.
And Brad has spent a lot of boots or horseshoes on the ground up there, so. Okay, the motion is to specifically for the South Manti to,
That's where I'm confused.
Pardon?
Before you go too far, because Manti North was light and going to liberal. So I guess I wanted to clarify, what Manti are we talking about? Is it Manti
so is the
South?
Manti,
There's Manti North and Manti South.
so he's just talking about the South Manti,
Yeah, which was actually moderate. So remaining at moderate.
remain at moderate and at 2024 tag numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the motion that's on the table. We have a second by Brad. Any more discussion on the motion? Wade? Did you have any comment regarding this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, face value, it looks like a huge increase. Spring, as it was noted, when there's more limited access on the mountain, there was a big jump, 150% increase in permits from 8 to 20. On your spring or summer and fall, it's an 18% increase from 17 to 20. And then another big increase was the spot and stock. On the spot and stock, we've only had 3 bears killed in the last year or this year and then the year before. So we're not, so the bulk of those permits have gone into the spot and stock and then the spring. And, you know, if it would help, we could definitely lower the number of spring permits. And the other thing is too, is that for 6 years, we've, because of the way the management plan was written, there were only so many units. How many? 4 units in the state that could be liberal, only 4 units. And that was decided 6 years ago. And so if you, and so for 6 years, I've tried to raise permits because it is a social thing. I've had many houndsmen tell me, you don't have a lot of cougars, but you have a lot of bears. And so I've tried to increase permits and I get shot down every time because we weren't able to move from a moderate to a liberal until this new plan. And so that's why chose to go liberal. And I think that the actual harvest of bears isn't going to increase all that much because a good bulk of those went into the spot stock. So that's what I got to say.
Okay, thanks, Wade. With that information, does that change anything on your motion?
I think the only thing I'll add, just for clarity, is and keep the Manti North at light as well. And so both the Manti South and Manti North at their previous management strategies and tags. That's the motion as long as you'll still second that. And let's
Okay.
give it a vote.
You got that change?
Yes, the motion is for both the south and the north to keep their hunt strategy and the hunt numbers the same.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote.
You mentioned that for the south, domestic sheep was the main reason. Is that the same for the north?
I think there's two things. I think as Wade just mentioned, I think on the south, he just felt like there was opportunity there to increase. And so we want to do that. North is really, it's difficult. We're trying to work with UDAF to give us more precise locations, but San Pete was a fairly high domestic sheep. It was like 30 last year. So the north would be more of the sheep related change. And that's the one that changed the most from light to liberal, I believe. So, and the south as well. Okay. Yeah. So I guess I should defer to the experts who know what's going on better than I do.
Okay, we have that motion. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll call for a vote. Kurt?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
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 Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes.
Eric, I was hoping you'd have to vote again.
5-3.
So.
I've lost enough friends for one go around, so I don't have that many to lose. Okay,
Eric, can we speak a little to our no vote?
to which?
To the vote that we gave of a no to the motion? Can we speak a little to that?
Yeah.
I think just one thing I'd like to point out, I appreciate the conversation about how the bulk of the tags went to spot and stock. And again, I don't know how many of you taken time to look over the success rates for spot and stock. But I mean, I kind of look at it like this December archery bull elk hunt that we have right now. We could dump 100 tags on that permit. And there's only a 5% success rate. So the only thing you're doing is pushing people through the system. So, again, I'm sure it's unit to unit specific about what we're looking at. But for me, since the bulk of the tags went to a unit with a hunt with extremely low success rate, it seems like on paper, we appeased people that might be watching saying, hey, we increased bear permits, but we did it in such a way that's really not going to increase bear harvest. So it sounded like a win-win for me. So that's why I voted no.
Anybody else that voted in opposition care to speak to their?
I just voted no because that North Manti portion was thrown in there. It seems to me that it was asked for the South Manti to be moved to moderate, but we weren't talking about the North Manti, and that might have been a good place to be like, okay, we've moved this drastically here, and we can see what the actual changes are.
Okay, thanks. Well, that takes care of a little bit of it. We still have a lot more to go.
I guess I can make a motion to move the book cliffs back to light and then boulder to moderate and then accept the rest of the action item as proposed.
Okay, we have a motion by Charles. Do we have a second?
Charles, would you want to break that into two? Do one and then we'll talk about the rest of it after?
Yeah, I guess if that's going to be a sticking point, which one are you looking to?
Oh, no,
break up?
just have a motion on the things you want to see different.
Yeah, I guess I can make a motion on the boulder being a moderate and the South Book Cliffs being a light.
Darren? Okay.
I just want to clarify there's two book cliffs units. I just want to make sure we're on the same page about which ones we're talking, both or roadless, or you just said south. So I'm assuming that's.
I would think it'd be both. But Bitter Creek South, yeah, because the roadless is, I imagine, is probably pretty light hunting anyway with dogs, as people have to throw.
Yeah,
a lot of
access
horses.
is an issue, as was obviously brought up. So yeah, so south, that works. I just need to know which unit.
So the Bitter Creek unit has light within the Book Cliffs, and then the boulder back to moderate.
You're gonna keep them both as one I was wondering, you're gonna break them out separately?
Yeah, the way I understood what Cash was asking me is I was putting both of those in and then asking to accept the rest. So we're gonna, the changes from what's been recommended, we'll make a motion item.
Okay. Got it. We have a motion to keep the book lift south at the current light status and the boulder at the current moderate status. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It'd be the Bitter Creek unit of the booklet.
Okay. Do we have a second on that motion? If not, the motion fails for lack of a second. Keep trying, guys.
Well, should we try it again, just to approve as is, as presented? Yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Dana to approve the remainder of the plan as presented, seconded by Scoot. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Kirk?
Yes.
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 Steve
Yes.
and Darren.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-1. Cash, you wanna?
I didn't vote no.
Oh, it's Charles, sorry. I can't keep track. I can't keep track of them.
Oh, sorry, just previously made that motion. Just representing the sportsmen that stood up and made that comment and sticking to my guns on it.
Okay, fair enough. All right. That brings us to the next action item. That takes care of that item, correct? That was the remainder. So brings us to action item 8, the Utah Cougar recommendations.
Yeah, so this is a pretty simple one. I'm happy to take questions, or if you want me to give a brief summary, I certainly can. This relates to allowing rim fire for trapped cougars as a way to dispatch them, and then allow the sale of green pelts rather than having to have them tanned first. So that's it.
Okay, thanks, Darren. Any questions from the RAC?
No, I only got one question, and this might be for the trappers here. Is there a market for green pelts on cougars right now?
Yeah, I'd be happy to let them answer. They probably know more about it than I do. So, I mean, as far as what the current market looks like.
Corey Farnsworth, Utah Trappers Association. There's not a huge market for them, but where we see the issue being people trapping them, either, especially if they perish in a snare, that they have an outlet for that rather than having to tan every single one that they catch. We really don't see there being a whole lot of people going out and looking for multiple cougars at this time, but we wanted that on the table.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the RAC? Questions from the audience? Okay, we do have some comment cards. We'll start with Corey and then Cody.
Corey Farnsworth, Utah Trappers Association. We approve and support the division's recommendations.
Cody Webster, Utah Houndsman Association. My comment would just be, I watched the RAC, the Southern RAC last night, and there was a lot of mention of, well, if I trap one and I've already got one and I don't really want it and I don't really need it, and we've already devalued cougars pretty badly, and Colorado almost just lost all of their ability to do anything with cougars. So we might ought to at least give them a little bit of value. That's it.
Okay, thanks. That's the last of the comment cards. So we'll bring it back to discussion from the RACs.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what that comment meant. Does that mean no green or tan?
Well, I would be leery of more steps towards anything that devalues them. And if we're allowing green pelts, it might not be the intention, but it could lead to even less value on them.
Any other discussion, Kirk?
Yeah, my only comment here is what happened last year is not how this should happen, but I don't think this action item is related to that. And so I'm supportive of what we're doing right here.
Okay, there are no more comments. We'll open it up for motions.
I'll make a motion to accept the action item as proposed.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Charles to accept the division's proposal as presented, seconded by Kirk. Any discussion on the motion? Let's bring it to a vote. Kirk?
Yes.
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 Darren?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that brings us to item 9, Utah Furbearer recommendations. Darren, any clarifications before we
No, I
open it up?
think this one's pretty straightforward. We're just adjusting season dates for the calendar. This would be 25-26 season and allowing the maximum for bobcats, the maximum number of permits and the longest season. So our bobcat numbers look good at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Any questions from the RAC? Any questions from the audience? Corey, you have a comment card for this item as well?
One as well. We approve and support the division's recommendations on this one and the next one.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any discussion from the RAC regarding this item? Okay, we'll entertain motions.
Move we accept the recommendation from the division.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Kirk to accept the division proposal as presented, seconded by Charles. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, vote. Kirk?
Yes.
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 Steve?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Number 10. Coyote bounty rule.
I think we'll comment real quick.
Yes.
Guys, one comment real quick. We have a bunch of virtual attendees online as well. I'm just going to ask that as we talk or other people talk to not react with any emojis because it pops on the screen and so I'd ask you just not to react in any way as we talk and discuss things.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Do you have any clarifications or anything you'd like to present before we open it up to questions?
I don't have any clarifications, so we can start with questions if you have any.
Okay, questions, Charles.
I saw that originally the legislature put aside $500,000 for this program. I think we spent $198,000, so they decrease it to 250. Am I correct in saying that? I guess my question is, with it being a legislative action, them assigning a certain amount of dollars to this, I can see now we're taking the steps to try and capitalize on those dollars, but how come we didn't bring this up earlier to try and capitalize on that $500,000 for those that are hunting or trapping coyotes and really incentivizing the project more?
That is a great question. I haven't been doing this program very long, but we did in 2012 start with $500,000, and then over time In the first few years, we did kind of overspend that budget, but it rolled over, so we were able to pay out all the coyotes. And over time, we didn't use a lot of that budget, so it was reduced to 250,000. And I'm not sure if you want to talk about the history a little more.
Yeah, sorry, just general background on this. Initially, this was a appropriation from the legislature of $500,000 to pay bounty in the initial iteration of the program. Over time, we have seen a reduction in what the payouts were. That money used to roll over. It was a separate thing that was appropriated annually, and it used to roll over. The legislature, I'm not sure if it was 2 or 3 years ago, instead of blocking that out, it just comes as part of our overall general season. So when they send us a certain proportion of general season money to fund the agency, and then we put those into different budgets. And the legislature essentially authorizes a certain amount to be spent for this activity. And then that money at the end of the budget, if we don't spend it, it goes back in the pot, and then we do the next year's budgeting. So that no longer rolls over, but it is based on activity in the program and kind of what we've been paying out, and that definitely entered into it.
So follow up to that, Darren, if we see an influx of higher bounties, is there money available to cover it if it goes over that?
Yeah, we've got some things in the plan. One thing is you have up to a year to turn your coyote in. So, if we ran out of money in a fiscal year, we would shut off payments, but that doesn't mean they couldn't wait till the next fiscal year to come back and get paid. And then, of course, we'd have to have a discussion about, in the budget discussion with the legislature, et cetera, how they wanted to handle that. So, so far, this is a program that they've seemed to have been supportive of. So I think if an increase in bounties results in need more money, I suspect they'd be supportive. I can't say for sure, but I'm just guessing based on what we've seen so far.
Okay, thanks.
I guess I had a question on the funding. When you say it just comes in the general fund, does that mean if the bounty program was not going, that the money could be spent for other things?
It is specifically earmarked for this program, but yeah, so I don't believe we'd get the money if it wasn't used for the bounty, just because they specifically asked for it to be used for that program.
Isn't this bounty like a legislative action item? So basically, they have decided that the DWR will pay out a certain amount for a bounty on a coyote. So it's not like we could just say that this couldn't exist and roll it into habitat funds for deer, elk, or something like that. This is set aside for
the
that.
incentive program. Mule Deer Protection Act is in code. So that's the program in itself is something that will be part of that we administer. The amounts, as Devri mentioned in her presentation, are we're recommending we adjust the rule to allow some flexibility in the amounts. But again, that block of money at the moment is something the legislatures ask us to. They ask us to have the program, administer the program, and then they make some determinations on funding based on, how much, what the need is. Does that help, Dana? Okay, sorry.
So my concern with I think this is a step in the right direction, but I still have the concern with the program. Generally speaking, I mean, there's the research, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm way off base and I'm hearing things that aren't correct, but we can put a bounty on coyotes, we can hunt them. They'll actually increase the number of pups that they're having. So it's quite possible that we're spending $50, that we're giving $50 for every coyote that's killed. It actually has nothing to do with mule deer because they're not even in their habitats still. And we're paying, and whether we could get that money for some work that would be ideal, right? If we could put it over here to habitat work. But even then, even if we can't do that, it's still coming out of our pockets, right? Out of citizens of the state of Utah. And it seems like a little bit of a waste that we're spending money where there's not even a mule deer, and we still are. I love that we're doing it when it matters and increasing that to 75, but it seems like we need to go a lot further, like maybe make that 150 for that time and that location and nothing anywhere else. Is the appetite just not there for that, or am I off somewhere in that logic?
So there is research on both sides of this. There are studies that show if you kill coyotes, they have the compensatory reproduction and they'll increase. And there was a study done nationwide, that just was published like a month or two ago, that spoke to this. They had some sites in Utah, but they weren't very representative. There's like a couple in southern Utah and maybe one up north. And then on the other side of that, Brock McMillan and Kent Hersey have done a study that was also published within the last year or two on Monroe Mountain, looking at targeted control of coyotes and how they how that impacted fawning. And they found, and Brock, you can speak with him, he knows the data really well. But from what I understand, it increased fawn survival by about 30% by using a controlled experiment, removing coyotes in a targeted area over time. And so we're trying to follow the findings of that study by by incentivizing the targeted areas of crucial mule deer habitat so that we can hopefully get that repeated take in the same areas to help the fawns, as this is the mule deer protection. And there's another part of your question.
Yeah. So yeah, my question is, can we move farther? Why not? Why this proposal isn't more, so we don't pay anything to somebody who kills a coyote in August, in where there's no deer, but then we pay maybe more during fawning periods on fawning grounds. Maybe we pay $100 there.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for the reminder. I was like, I knew there's another part. So we did talk about different amounts, and I believe, I can't remember if it was the legislature, but there was people generally wanted to maintain the $50 for statewide, and we chose $75 in crucial so that we could provide an extra incentive, but not unnecessarily increase fraud by people moving coyotes or whatever. And we do have an app that helps reduce fraud by having them geotag their kill sites. And if you do want to discuss like increasing bounties, we've talked about it, and if you want to increase it to like 100 in crucial and maintain the 50 elsewhere, that would probably be a good place to start. And then we can see how that falls out, see if more people are coming or if it is really helping target in those areas, just to kind of stay within our budget and make sure that we're able to pay out. And, but it's obviously up to the RAC to make a motion on whatever you deem appropriate. Yeah, I hope that answered a little bit of your question more.
No, yeah. I guess, so the last question, is there, other than the maybe social aspect of it, is there any biological value in keeping the blanket $50 per coyote, no matter where or when that's shot?
So there has been discussion about like desert mule deer, for example, came up, like are there possibilities that if we take coyotes out of these other areas that typically aren't considered deer habitat, if the deer will be able to repopulate historic areas? And so there is potential biologic benefit to that. There's also side benefits of different agriculture or other places that are having coyote issues, but largely we're trying to incentivize the targeted area because we want the mule deer production to be the most beneficial in those areas.
And as far as the research goes, there's the potential that you might be able to help like desert mule deer, but there's also the potential that they're just going to have more pups and we're paying $50. We're just burning it.
Yeah, there's both sides of the issue to look at there.
Okay.
Can you remind me, like, what are the states surrounding ours? Do they pay a bounty and how much?
I'm not super sure about that.
They do not. I'm not aware of any other state. There might be some counties I'm not aware of, but states don't.
So I did hear that you had some discussion about maybe wanting to keep things at $50, but often when we look at problems, sometimes taking away helps. So did anyone consider that if coyotes are killed for $50, keep that in your habitat and then just reduce it by 25 for outside of habitat?
We didn't have discussions that way, and I'm not sure if that's more legislature based or just what the biologists have seen. Because there has been a lot of discussion about this program was put in place in 2012, and since then there's been obviously inflation, and the program hasn't changed since 2012, and so a lot of people think that even $50 is not very incentivizing for the gas and all the time that you spend trying to hunt coyotes, because they're pretty hard to hunt. And so that's why there hadn't been much discussion about lowering things past that $50.
So the idea then is that by increasing it to $25, that's not enough of an incentive for somebody to drive a coyote from some low desert country up into the mountains and then try to put it on the app.
Yeah, so that was the idea, is that we'll incentivize people to go hunting in those areas, but yeah, $25 hopefully wouldn't be enough that they would spend extra gas to drive them to places that they didn't actually take them from.
Could they have it be a video where they go and wiggle the coyote and it's not, rigor mortis hasn't set in, and that way you could potentially give more money, $150, take away or decrease maybe for areas where it's outside of habitat to like $25 or something.
We could look at having them submit a video. That would be a lot more data, and a lot of times they're killing outside of service. So we could look into that data-wise to prevent more fraud. But yeah, I would say we need to circle back on that so I can talk with our GIS team that is able to implement all of this.
There might be way better ways to do it, but that's what came to mind.
Any other questions? Brad?
I've got a question. So they're gonna drop the requirement to send the ears in, correct?
Yes,
This is the
yeah.
proposal anyway. And so what other proof do they send? Is it the jaw as well? And so it'll just be exclusively the jaw? Is that?
Yeah, so currently we require the ears with the scalp attached and the jaw because we can pull the tooth for age data. And there has been desire to drop the ear requirement because when they submit them, we clip the ears so that we can mark that they've been checked in. But that can ruin the quality of the pelt if people want to do other things with it. And so if we're able to pull the teeth, then you obviously can't submit it again because the teeth aren't there to pull, and you can tell when they've been pulled.
So you're pretty confident that the jaw would be enough, huh?
Yeah, and there are scenarios where coyotes don't have those premolar teeth, and if that's the case, we'll just keep the entire jaw. So we've talked with our biologists, and we can have different ways to implement like fraud reduction to prevent duplicate entries. Yeah. Mhm.
Any more questions from the RAC?
I guess I had a question. Based on like cost per coyote, how much does it cost for like a professional UDAF person to do the targeted killing per coyote? I'm just curious on the cost benefit analysis for this.
I don't know if I have a exact number off the top of my head. I will say this, that targeted intensive removal is typically the best way to spend a dollar if you're going to do predator management. So that targeted program, I think dollar for dollar is probably giving us the most benefit to mule deer. And the way we do that is we designate specific areas where we want Department of Ag to go. It's mostly aerial, either fixed wing or helicopter. They're using thermal scopes, so they're pretty effective. So we kind of have two things going on. One is to involve the public through an incentive program, and then the other is where we get pretty targeted. And between the two, we're hoping that we're seeing some benefit. And then just as far as amounts go, there's no magic number about 50 and 75. Devri talked about some of our thinking there, but we can certainly adjust. And, in terms of fraud, we'll keep our eyes open, and we've made cases in the past, people are abusing the system. So I think what I would say is, we're not quite sure how this might change things. So I'd recommend that we don't go over $100 on the crucial deer range. But if you wanted to adjust everything else down, we're certainly open to that discussion.
Can you clarify your comment on involving the public? Because the public can hunt coyotes without a bounty,
That's
correct?
true. Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
And again, this is This stemmed out of a concern that the legislature had for mule deer numbers. And so this was one way that they directed the division. Well, this is a program they implemented to try and address that. And obviously there's a lot of things going on. And so sometimes with mule deer, you address the things you have some control over, and obviously we can't control the weather. So hopefully we do what we can where we can and hope that we get good conditions.
Hypothetically, in 5 minutes, if I make a motion that we reduce the bounty in the non-crucial areas to 0 and increase it in the crucial areas to 100, would that fit within the statute that exists? Like, is that within the bounds of what we actually can do in the division?
Yeah, so we removed the $50 cap to specify in the rule. And so we can change the amounts to whatever the RAC would like to see. You can.
Yeah, I got a question, and Darren might have to answer this one again, but so does UDAF get an appropriation for predator control the same as the division?
So we, for the deer work, we have an agreement. We use, when you buy a big game tag, there's a $5 fee for predator. That's a separate budget, different than the general fund money for the incentive program. We use that money with UDAF to fund their deer program. Obviously, they've got livestock programs as well, and they get funding for the livestock side. We also ask them to do some other things for us, with regards to bighorn sheep and bison, and so those are funded from big game monies. So there's different things going in, and then there's also a county match program that comes out of that $5 fee. And in addition to that, we do fund some positions. So each region has a predator specialist position that's funded in part with some of those funds. So they do other things besides that, but so we fund those positions partially. But again, that's a separate pot of money. So hopefully that helps.
So this program, I guess if it passes the wildlife board, the way it's presented, would that take effect for every coyote killed after that point, or for coyotes that have not been turned in prior? Because they have up to a year, right? So if a coyote was killed last month, how would it work that way?
It's up to whatever the RAC and the wildlife board, but I imagine that it would start from the time it's approved with coyotes killed. We would need a little bit of time to implement the hunt planner map and just have clear guidelines across the board. But yeah, I would say from coyotes killed from that point forward, since that's directive, unless there's different opinions.
To be clear, the way you would implement that is with your survey 1, 2, 3 right now. As you make a mark, you take a photo, you've got the date, time stamp. You could easily say that this coyote was killed at this time or this coyote was not. So I don't think that would be too hard to
So just nuts and bolts on how this all works. The wildlife board will make a decision. The rule change there's a period of time that has to pass before it gets filed. And then as soon as that gets filed, we would know the dates. We'd probably start from that date forward with the change. So, and that's usually a month or so. It varies depending on some factors, but essentially that's how it would work.
I just had one last question. Just clarification on the change in the rule. I think it might be on the last page, 64-9. I didn't quite understand the number 3, which said once the annual funding allocation for coyote removal is expended, it says like no further payment will be made for that year regardless of pelt, and then crossed out ears. Did we need jaw? Like, why is it pelt all of a sudden back there? Does anyone know? Does anyone, I don't know if anyone cares. I just got confused.
That could have been an oversight on our part. It's just essentially if you've killed a coyote within that year, even if you have killed a coyote before the funding runs out, if you didn't check it in, we aren't able to pay you out until the next fiscal year when the funding is reallocated.
So theoretically, if you killed something in 2024 and it ran out of money, you could turn it in 2025?
As long as it's within 365 days from when you killed it.
Okay.
Last question. Okay, any question from the audience? Not, we know that the Utah Trappers Association supports this recommendation. So we'll open it up to comments and discussion from the RAC. I'll start. To answer your question, any dead coyote's a good coyote. So to not incentivize people, I love to hunt coyotes. If I'm being selfish, I like your idea because it'll probably eliminate a lot of people from going out and hunting them. That being said, if we could put that money towards 1080, I'd support what you're going after 100%, but we're not going to get 1080. So the other option is to incentivize the take of coyotes by sportsmen. I know that up in the north, they've had, the professional hunters that go in and do it. They actually have two helicopters up there. That's very effective. The cost of that is significantly more than what the bounty is able to cover to do it statewide. So I guess my 2 cents worth is I like the program. One thing I am concerned about, I like the idea of a video. I don't know if the app's able to accommodate a video. I do see potential with fraud with people shooting a coyote, and it'd have to be fast because, rigor mortis will set in pretty quickly within a few hours. So, but they could shoot one somewhere out of deer habitat, drive up there, take their picture, and the timestamp and everything is such that, but if you have to shake that coyote to show that it's still limber and movable, I think that helps go a long way to preventing some of that fraud and that money that Kirk's concerned about with, being wasted. So
that could be tough with snares.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Snared coyote may have been dead a while. So I think what I was just gonna say is, obviously, whatever we decide, we'll work with law enforcement and they do this every day, all the time. They'll look at it, figure out ways to look for red flags in the program, and we'll do our best. And
does the app accommodate video?
I think probably it could. Again, it's a data storage thing, and we do get some feedback about this is already too complicated, and so we don't want to discourage folks by making it more complicated. But having said that, if that's something that we feel like is necessary to prevent people from abusing the system, we'll look at all options. And I think we can handle that end of things. So.
Yeah, I may have gone too deep in the means and methods of how that happens, but I guess the idea would be, I like the idea of giving more in areas where it matters and less in areas where it doesn't.
Yeah, I think, and that's a good strategy if you're trying to affect impacts to deer, is to be focused. And
yeah, and I would support a higher amount in the critical areas if we are confident that we can curtail the fraud, because that's the one thing I worry about is people, if there's money involved, they'll do what they can to abuse the system.
So I get where Kirk's coming from this. I mean, if you look at the history of predator management, when you look at even strychnine days, how that affected wolves and coyotes. Coyotes have only expanded. There are no wolves here. So I see that, but I also know this is earmarked by the legislature, and the legislature is willing to pay for it, has paid $500,000 when they first put it out. We weren't able to spend it. I would say we should up the numbers on both sides. I would rather see that money, because it's going to get spent either way. It's either going to get spent into the pocketbooks of people that are killing coyotes that are sportsmen, or it's going to get spent on something completely different somewhere else. So just from that perspective, I would say the increase on the amount to pay per coyote, I mean, Inflation has only gotten higher. I doubt that many people are making a ton of money off of killing coyotes at $50. I mean, the amount of driving you take, even our rules and trapping, your 48-hour checks, things like that. We're not looking to pay people to do this professionally. We're just looking to incentivize the action. And if there's money available to it, the legislature wants to give it to us. I'd say, let's see the increase. And then there's the step in that lowland area that isn't mule deer habitat and higher in the area that is mule deer habitat is progressing us towards that more mule deer management. And I think that's a good step.
Cash?
Yeah, I got a question and a comment. I know it was in the presentation, but I can't recall it. How much money did we not spend last year?
So last year we spent 152,000 paying them out, and I can look up the exact numbers for all the years before that, but I believe within the last 5 years, we haven't reached the $250,000.
Right, so it sounds like we're $100,000 short, right? So I can kind of see what you're saying where, hey, maybe we can increase it on both sides. Although at the same time, I really hate paying for, if the point of the program is the mule deer, then what are we paying for? I agree with that. So I don't know, I guess, and we have all these different options being thrown out here. Me, I would say the thing I like the most is I would like to see for the non-critical to go down to $25. I don't know about zero, but $25. If you're going to kill a coyote, we'll give you something for it. But I definitely think that our critical areas need to be higher than 75. They should be 100, 125, somewhere in that range so we can stay within the budget. But for me, I'd still like to pay something, but I think the non-critical areas should be lower than what they are currently being proposed, and the critical areas should be higher than what they're currently being proposed. So.
And I looked up those numbers just barely. So in 2020, it dropped. So 2019 was 410,000, and then 2020 dropped down to 200,000. 2021 was 246, and then after that, it was 173, 189, 152. So
It wasn't that long ago. We didn't even, we were hitting, yeah. So
was that a result? I think it seems like you could turn like the whole head or something, or the ears. It was different. We changed the requirements, right? Did that coincide with that large drop in participation? And I know maybe early on, like when it was first introduced, there was tons of problems with people going to coyote contests in Nevada and bringing
Right, I
theirs
think
over.
probably the biggest change is when we went to the app and made people document where they killed it. And that, I think, got a lot of abuse out of the system. I think there was a little bit of, people were pretty gung-ho at first, and then it got kind of hard, to hunt and kill coyotes in some areas. And so, and the other thing we've seen is that the ages have consistently dropped. So, I think over 50%, the last time we looked at ages, were 2 years old or younger. So they're killing reproduction, but they're not taking those adults as much. So a lot of things going on. We also had some drop-offs in small mammals that could account for some drops in population as well. So,
Steve, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I have a friend that consistently harvests coyotes. He's very good at it, and he spends some time what I would think could be targeted mule deer fawning area, and it is significantly harder to kill coyotes in that country. It's not as open, and he has to spend more time at it, and he does it mostly for the challenge, but I think it is harder to kill coyotes in that country. Just a comment.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I mean, for me, I like the 50 on the outside, but I do like the idea of a higher price for as long as if we're not spending up to the amount, I think there's room for that. So.
Yeah, I'm willing to adjust my hypothetical. But I still, yeah, the legislature is going to spend that money on something else, but that doesn't sit well with me that we're spending money that quite possibly is doing nothing, because there's been plenty of bounties on coyotes. No other surrounding state has any bounty, and it's not like they're all over there in Colorado drinking cocktails and like, oh, this is easy over here. You see just as many over there as you do here. And so we're just spending this money without any real documented benefit of it, except for when it needs to be, where it needs to be, and then we've got really good documented. So that's why I like the extreme of 0 and 100, because Darren told me to not go over 100. Otherwise, we'd go higher than that. But yeah, I mean, 25 and 100, I can compromise.
I was on board with that too. And then what Charles says makes a lot of sense. If we're kicking that money back to go to who knows what, right? And so if that just keeps it in, we're still shooting coyotes for maybe the fringe benefit of someday we might have a desert deer herd, So I like the idea of increasing now and not decreasing that lower end. When I say increasing, I'm talking about the upper end, obviously, the critical.
Okay, I think we've hashed that out pretty thoroughly. So we'll entertain a motion.
I'll give it a shot. It's been more than 5 minutes. Yeah. I'll make a motion that we reduce the general bounty to 25 and the bounty for crucial deer habitat, increase that to 100.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Motion by Kurt and seconded by Kath. Any discussion on the motion?
Just one question. Is it going to be difficult to define crucial areas?
Yeah, they've got maps in there that define that, so.
Yeah, so there's mapped mule deer habitat and you can actually look at it on Hunt Planner. It's just under their mule deer habitat layers and it's what the biologists have looked at. So we have a defined map and we'll just create an additional coyote hunt map so people know exactly where those are.
So Kirk, essentially you want to take that $25 increase and just readjust it. You want to put $25 on top of the 75 and then take it away from the desert. I guess my thought is I still don't think we're going to spend all of this money that's available to us with that. And that's at least what I
Yeah,
think.
essentially it's the same money. You're taking 25 from here and putting 25 here. If you kill the same number of coyotes, you spend the same $170,000, you're leaving a bunch on the table. So.
Yeah. I mean, I get the argument, but it's still money out of my pocket one way or the other. And I just don't like the general argument of, I mean, it's like when I had a bunch of college roommates and, you had to make sure you ate your macaroni and cheese before they got to it, like, let's just do the efficient thing here.
Well, and in another year, can't we assess it? And we're only tied annually, right? So if it seems to work, we can go and improve.
I don't know, is there some sort of a plan that this?
So coyotes are an unprotected species that we don't really have management control. So we don't have management authority. So there's not a specified date. So if you'd like to see what a year of this does, you can make a motion to have us come back next year if you'd like. Because this is it comes to the RACs on an as needed basis, which is why it's been since 2012 since we looked at the program. So.
And I need to listen better, apparently. Have we ever hit the 250? I felt like we said just a few years ago, we were at or above the 250 on this expenditure, right?
Yeah, so I believe it was 2019. And again, like Darren mentioned, and I probably misspoke. I think this came through the RACs in 2018, but I was in, I wasn't here, so I didn't know the history of the program. But yeah, in 2018, we implemented the app, which led to a lot of fraud reduction. And also a lot of people had frustrations with the app is from what I've heard. And so I think that's what led to the decrease to below 250,000.
Yeah. So I guess my point is we were spending that money not that long ago. And matter of fact, I mean, if we can overspend, that looks great because maybe the legislature will give us some money back. But I guess what I'm trying to say is we might feel like we're leaving money on the table, but it was not that long ago. We were actually already overspending. So I still think this is a safe motion, and that's why I'm still second.
But the key to that is when the app was introduced, that's when it dropped off. We still have the app. It's not going to go back up.
I hope that it does, because we just said we're gonna give you $100 to kill one coyote. So, I mean, my point is, it's a 50% increase in bounty. No, sorry, it's double. It's more than 50, right? I just offered you double for a coyote. So I hope it incentivizes more activation in the program. And I agree. We don't know what will happen. Maybe
It
there'll be less people.
incentivizes more potential for fraud.
And I guess when this was originally put out, it was earmarked at $500,000. So there's money, and there are legislatures who want to see $500,000 spent on this program. And that's why I say we're leaving money on the table.
What I see happening if we do this is we're not going to spend very much money, and they're going to reduce it to $75,000 to get to a point where it may just eventually go away. And I think this is still a really good thing. But on the other hand, if we keep it at the $100 for the critical areas, and we keep it at 50 for the non-critical, and we run out of money, then come back next year and let's adjust those numbers. Say, let's drop that bottom end to 25. But in my opinion, I think it's in our best interest to spend that money to keep it there. And then in the future, if we need to adjust that more strategically, we still have that same pot of money to work with and not a smaller amount.
Yeah,
Because it's just been proven they'll reduce it if we don't spend it.
that's exactly what I'm getting at, Scoot. And I mean, my thought would be 75, 100, but at 50 and 100 is easier to swallow, then that's what we swallow. But yeah, to just move the money around to say you're going to get less on non-mule deer ground, more on another. If we're still not spending the money or still not asking for the money, the legislature's not going to give it to us. It's going to go somewhere else, and mule deer aren't going to see the benefit, even if it's minuscule, aren't going to see the benefit.
Yeah, because if we reduce that bottom end, that doesn't mean that extra 25 is going to compensate. There's way less coyotes killed in those critical areas than there are in those non-critical areas. So I think we'd see a humongous reduction and then not have funding for the program.
That's the risk I see as well.
I'd like to point out that we do have a motion and a second out. Yeah.
I stick with it.
Okay, the motion is to drop the non-critical areas to $25, increase critical areas to 100. We have a motion. Did we have a second? Yes. Cash seconded. Okay. We've discussed it plenty. Let's go for a vote. Kirk?
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Steve?
No.
Darren?
No.
Okay, that motion fails. Take another stab at it?
I move to increase it in the critical areas to 100 and keep it at 50 on the other.
Okay,
What
we
was
have
the proposal for the moderate? It was 50, right? To keep it at 50?
Yeah.
Okay, stick with that.
Okay, motion by Scoot to keep the non-critical areas at 50 and increase the critical area to $100. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Steve. Any discussion on the motion? I think we discussed it already. Call for a vote. Kurt?
I'll vote for it. Sure. Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And Darren?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-2. Scoot made the motion?
Just increase the upper end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And seconded by.
Seconded by Charles. Oh, Steve, seconded by Steve, yeah. Okay. I think that covers it. Do we need to make a motion? That's basically it, right? Or is there more to that?
There is the rest of the red line, but essentially the ears and then other just
Yeah, so we
grammatical
need a motion
changes.
to accept the remainder.
So I'll move that we approve the rest of the division's recommendation.
And I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Brad to accept the remainder, seconded by Kirk. Call for a vote.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 Steve?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-1. Dana, would you like to?
I just think when agencies need to manage things, you should keep things simple by increasing the bounty and increasing some more complications. It just makes it a more complicated program, and you look around and other states don't have it. So we're just trying to help with management.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to agenda item 11. Rusty, you're up. Shed antler gathering recommendations. Anything you want to clarify or?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just because this recommendation has a little bit of history behind it, I'll give just a brief rundown. But this past spring, we presented some changes to recommended changes to shed hunting. And as we went through that public process, one of the recommendations was to establish a non-resident shed hunting season that would start May 1st, and then not have a season for residents. As we went through that public process and got to the board, the board asked us to reconvene the shed hunting committee and to revisit that topic in particular, and hash out a little more that resident, non-resident season thing, with the sentiment that we shouldn't jump on this bandwagon like other states are doing and treat non-residents differently. And so we reconvened the committee, talked about that at length. There was a lot of different strategies presented to deal with the non-resident season. And at the end of the day, we couldn't come to a consensus on that. So as a result, the division's recommendation is to not have a season for residents or non-residents at this time, just kind of the status quo, and we'll continue to track non-resident shed hunting in the state, and we still have the emergency shed closure rule that's in place, where we could close the whole state if we had the winter conditions to warrant, laying off and giving the deer a break. So, but yeah, with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thanks, Rusty. I usually try to watch the other RACs. I have not been able to do that this go around. I know the Northern RAC voted to keep the non-resident shed season. How did the other RACs go? Do you know?
Yeah.
Not that makes a difference on what we do, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, hopefully people correct me if I'm wrong, but Central Region, I believe, voted to accept as presented. Northern Region, like you said, voted to for the original recommendation to have a non-resident start date, but no season for residents. And then the Southern Region last night voted to accept as presented, with the caveat to look at body condition as a metric to potentially do a shed hunting closure, which is kind of already built into the emergency winter feeding policy. Right now, the rule is if we meet the triggers in the emergency winter feeding policy to feed deer, then we also meet the triggers to close shed hunting statewide. And so that's already kind of built in. Within that plan, there's metrics for body condition and things like that. So we already take that into account.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. And again, I guess I'm just dumb. So I remember when this came through and the proposal was to do a non-resident season. But then I thought when we got to the wildlife board, they didn't take an action on that. And instead they said, go back and meet and have a discussion. Am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah, well, they voted against that part of the recommendation, to not have a non-resident season at the time until we reconvened and hashed it out. And so so we're going back through this public process and then bring it back to the board in January, at which point they would make a decision to stay as we are or change it any number of ways.
Okay, I guess I'm a little confused at why it's an action item. I feel like we're having an informational. We already don't have seasons, and the recommendation here is keep it that way. So there's no change being proposed. So that's why I had to ask. I'm just confused why this is an action item, not an informational.
Yeah, it's a little strange, but the action item that the board gave us was to reconvene the committee and then retake the recommendation around through the public process. Okay. And part of the conversation in that board was to gather more public input. And so that's kind of a part of what we're doing.
Any other questions? Questions from the audience? Steve, did you have a question?
I do. I was just, you talked about the emergency closures and then you talked about what the Southern RAC kind of made their decision for. I was curious. It seems obvious up north when you have a heavy winter that you could have a closure, but I think down south we have times when we have drought and the body condition on those does is so poor. Have you ever had a time where you have considered a closure because of drought conditions versus heavy snow conditions? If that makes sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah, it does. It's all kind of built in. We do look at body fat in December when we capture deer. So it would kind of play into it. But then I think as we typically, even when adult deer come in pretty skinny, we don't see the adult mortality in winter unless there's some pretty, extreme winter conditions. And so probably even during drought conditions, I don't know that we'd shut down the shed hunt without those other metrics being hit due to winter conditions. And yeah, it's a great question. And in years past, when we've had those really bad droughts, a lot of the mortality we've seen was in summer, not winter. Sometimes you kind of get a flip where in the southern region, you get that precipitation in a bad winter and it actually helps some of those deer. So it's hard where the two halves of the state are pretty extremely different. But yeah, it's a good point.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Any other questions for Rusty from the RAC? Question from the audience? We do have a couple comment cards. Start with Guy and then Cody.
I think just we need to leave it like it is. I don't think we need a season, don't need tags, don't need to limit residents, non-residents. It's just open issues that we don't need to law enforcement wise, season wise. I mean, if I'm out riding my mule somewhere, middle of December, January, February, lion hunting, and I run across an antler on the ground, prohibiting me to be able to pick that up with a season seems silly. I'm already there. I'm already doing the actions I am. Just tying a deer horn on my saddle is not doing anything. And we're hunting elk into January 30th. I mean, come on, let's get serious. We're seriously considering what we're doing in the winter to wildlife. We don't need to be hunting elk clear through January. We need to look at what we're really doing. And this is just a scapegoat by saying it's shed antler hunters out there causing all our problems.
Thanks, Cody.
Cody Webster. I'm just in favor of leaving it with no seasons. I've experienced, at least in this neck of the woods, when we have had the seasons, the closures, I've never seen more people, and the majority of them have already been there before the opener. And then you get the big rush of people on the opener, and most of the horns are already picked up anyway. So by far the most, cross-country travel with motorcycle ATVs I've seen is when people are, they're riding their four-wheeler across there. If they can get away with that, they can pick up a horn too. So, it's maybe well-intentioned, but the effects of it in this area of the state is a big negative. So I just hope we don't have any seasons if we can avoid it. If we do have a season, maybe we look at an earlier opener if there is that emergency situation and limit that time for the earlier people that aren't necessarily following the rule. So.
Sorry, turned that off. Thanks, Cody. We'll bring it back to discussion from the RAC. Any comments, discussion?
I do.
Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think, I don't know, I'm looking at it from the big picture, and it seems like everything we're talking about tonight is about protecting mule deer. We're killing coyotes, we're changing bear permits, we're talking about neonates, the effect of bears on neonates and lions on neonates. But the research is all saying that the body condition of these does, how it affects fawns and success with fawns, but it doesn't seem like we're willing to make a sacrifice with that. And I get the logistics of how hard it is to maybe police this and to keep people ethical, but it just seems like if there is something that might influence what condition the deer are in and their ability to fawn and have successful fawns, and why we wouldn't want to do everything in our power to maybe consider the biologists would know better than me in terms of the timing on that, but that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Steve. Charles?
Yeah, when this was first an action item, I was pretty for it, just from my own experiences out on the ground, especially around these edges of Colorado and things. We get a lot of influx of people that come in around the edge. But with that being said, we've sent it through, the public's spoken, they don't want it. And who am I to say that we should implement it if they don't want it? So I'm for the presentation as the proposal as given.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Any other comments? I'll kind of, I agree with what Cody said. I've watched over the years when we have had closures, and I agree with the closures on the hard winters, because it doesn't keep everybody out, but it keeps some out. But every time we've had closures, I guarantee that it's impossible to police. And I've heard so many stories and people actually videoing people picking up antlers before the season opens and nothing happens. So I don't think there's any point in having rules and regulations if we can't enforce them.
The irony in that is that the person out there videoing is probably affecting the deer just as much as who picked up the horns.
Possibly. I mean, if they're out walking, yeah. If they're videoing from a vehicle, maybe not, but. Okay. If there's no other discussion, we'll entertain a motion.
I move that we support the division's recommendation of not having any limitations on shed hunting.
I second that.
Okay, motion by Brad to accept the division's proposal as presented, seconded by Charles. Any discussion? Okay, vote.
Yes.
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 Steve
No.
and Darren.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 7-1. Steve, you want to elaborate? We pretty much know why you don't want it.
Yeah, and you kind of understand my perspective on it. I still think that we could limit when people go out and still give people all the opportunity later on and in the fall. And to me, we talk about the social decisions why we do stuff, and for me, it's kind of an opportunity for hunters to rally and say, we want to do everything in our power to protect mule deer. And so I get the challenges of it. And so anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Rusty.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to our last action item. Everybody okay if we get this knocked out, or you need a pit stop? So, all right. Jason, anything you want to clarify?
No, I don't have anything to add. I think we covered it in the presentation.
Okay. Any questions from the RAC?
Yeah, I got one. I grew up out in Twilla, and I felt like when I was growing up, and if you would talk to the wildlife biologists, the attitude for that area that I guess we're proposing to call the house Tintic, so takes in that Vernon limited entry deer unit and Tintics. The attitude was, well, we don't want the elk there. That's why it's an any bully unit. And so I'm a little surprised kind of in this proposal, we're saying we want 600 elk there. And I was wondering if you can kind of speak to the shift from saying we don't want any out there to we're okay with 600.
Yeah, so it's had an objective of 150 for quite a while, which is pretty low for that area. And part of the reason for that historically was because it was a limited entry deer unit, and that thought that maybe the deer and elk would compete with each other. And since that time, we've collected a bunch of data, and that's probably what's changed the most is the GPS data that we've collared both deer and elk in that area. And what we've found is they don't overlap that much. The elk kind of stay out in the grassland juniper areas, and the deer like the shrubby mountainous terrain. And in addition to that, we've had some fires in that area that have burned a lot of the, been juniper woodlands, and it's coming back kind of more as grasslands, especially some of like the blue bunch and some of the wheatgrasses. And so I guess the short answer is, things have changed quite a bit in the last 15, 20 years in that area. And based on that information, that data, we felt like we could make a shift and have, a good limited entry deer unit, as well as grow more elk in that area, providing additional hunting opportunity for elk.
Awesome. So was that the feeling of the committee then that you guys put together for these management plan as a whole?
Yeah, so we put the committee together and they unanimously agreed on this proposal that we're providing today.
Any other questions? Any questions from the audience? There are no comment cards, so any discussion from the RAC? Not, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept as proposed.
Okay, motion by Charles to accept the division's proposal as presented. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Kurt. Any discussion? Vote?
Yes.
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 Yes, I made the motion, so I guess.
Yes. Steve
Yes.
and Darren.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. That's our last item. Thanks for hanging in there with us. We'll entertain a motion to cease and desist.
Move that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, thanks, everybody.